The dust settled around the weathered pickup truck as it came to a halt at the edge of the failing cornfield. James Harper wiped sweat from his brow, squinting at the figure approaching through the shimmering heat. A woman in expensive hiking clothes, clearly lost and exhausted, asked to rest in his old shed. With calloused hands, he passed her a jug of water, never suspecting she was Alexandra Chen, founder of Pixel Sync, worth billions, not millions. 2 weeks later, she returned with documents in hand and hope in her eyes, not just to buy his land, but to build something together that would save his family farm and fulfill her dream of creating sustainable agriculture technology. As she extended her hand, his life was about to change forever. "Sometimes the most valuable things grow from the most barren soil," she said with a smile that held the promise of tomorrow. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The midday sun beat down mercilessly on James Harper's sun-weathered skin as he surveyed the parched field before him. Once rich with promise, the soil had betrayed him for the third season in a row. At 42, James had inherited the 300-acre farm from his father, who had inherited it from his father before him. 3 generations of sweat and sacrifice poured into land that was now refusing to yield anything but disappointment and mounting debt. The farm had been struggling for years, but this season was proving to be the worst yet. A combination of rising costs, unpredictable weather patterns, and predatory loan terms had pushed James to the edge of financial ruin. The latest bank statement lay crumpled in the pocket of his faded work jeans. The bold red numbers, a constant reminder of how close he was to losing everything. "Dad?" His daughter's voice pulled him from his thoughts. 18-year-old Lily approached, her mother's eyes staring out from her freckled face, a painful reminder of the wife he'd lost to cancer 5 years ago. "Mr. Rodriguez called. He said he can't extend any more credit at the supply store. We're cut off until we pay at least half of what we owe." James nodded, not trusting his voice. Another door closed. Another option gone. "We'll figure something out, Lil. We always do." The words sounded hollow, even to his own ears. Lily didn't argue, but the worry in her eyes spoke volumes. College applications were due soon, and they both knew there was no money for tuition. Her dreams, like the crops, were withering in the unforgiving heat of their reality. "I'm heading into town to see if I can pick up an extra shift at the diner," she said, jingling the keys to their only working vehicle, a 15-year-old pickup truck that protested with every mile. "Take the back road," James advised. "The bridge on County Line is still out." He watched as she nodded and walked away, her shoulders carrying a weight no 18-year-old should have to bear. Left alone with his thoughts, James continued his walk through the fields, mentally calculating how much of his crop might be salvageable. The numbers weren't adding up, no matter how many times he ran them. The irrigation system had failed last month, a repair he couldn't afford, leaving his corn vulnerable to the drought that had settled over the region like an unwelcome guest. As the sun climbed higher, James made his way back toward the house, a once proud 2-story farmhouse that now showed signs of neglect: peeling paint, a sagging porch, windows that let in drafts during the winter months. He'd been putting off repairs, prioritizing the farm equipment and livestock needs over comfort. His gaze drifted to the old shed near the edge of the property. Unlike the house, the shed had been recently reinforced with salvaged lumber and a new metal roof, a project he'd undertaken last winter when he still had hope that this season would turn things around. It served as his workshop, a place where he repaired what he could to avoid the cost of replacement. Inside were tools passed down through generations, each with stories etched into their worn handles. As he approached the weathered structure, something out of place caught his eye: a sleek silver car parked on the dirt road that ran along his property line. It was the kind of vehicle that belonged in the city, not on the dusty back roads of rural America. Curiosity piqued, James altered his course, heading toward the unfamiliar car. As he drew closer, he noticed a figure standing beside it, studying what appeared to be a map spread across the hood. The woman didn't notice his approach at first, too absorbed in whatever she was searching for on the paper before her. She was dressed in hiking clothes that looked too clean and knew to have seen much actual trail use. Expensive brands that James recognized from the outdoor catalogs Lily sometimes flipped through, dreaming of adventures beyond the farm's boundaries. "You lost?" James called out when he was about 20 yards away, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, and for a moment, James was struck by the intensity of her gaze. Dark eyes assessed him quickly, professionally, before her face softened into a polite smile. "I think so," she admitted, pushing a strand of short black hair behind her ear. "I was trying to find the trailhead for Hawks Ridge, but I think I took a wrong turn about 5 miles back." James nodded. "You're pretty far off. Hawks Ridge is about 15 miles northeast of here." He gestured vaguely in the correct direction. "You'll need to head back to the main road and take Highway 16 east until you hit the ranger station." 15 miles? She sighed, folding the map with precise movements. "I was afraid of that. I've been driving in circles for almost an hour." Now that he was closer, James could see that despite her composed demeanor, the woman was flushed from the heat, small beads of sweat forming at her temples. The temperature had been climbing steadily all morning, already well into the 90s with humidity that made the air feel like a wet blanket. "You all right?" he asked, noticing a slight tremor in her hands as she tucked the map into a sleek leather bag. "Heat's nothing to mess with today." "I'm fine," she said automatically, but then seemed to reconsider. "Actually, I've been on the road since dawn, and I didn't anticipate getting lost. I thought I'd be hiking in the shade by now." She glanced at her watch, an understated but clearly expensive timepiece. "I don't suppose there's somewhere nearby where I could rest for a bit before getting back on the road? A cafe or park?" James almost laughed at the idea. The nearest establishment was Rodriguez's general store, 10 miles back, and the only park was the playground behind the elementary school, 20 minutes in the opposite direction. "Nothing like that around here, I'm afraid." He hesitated, then made a decision that surprised even himself. "But you're welcome to rest in my shed over there. It's not much, but it's out of the sun and relatively cool." The woman looked where he pointed, her expression unreadable. For a moment, James regretted the offer. She was a stranger, after all, and he had nothing but a rundown farm to offer. Why would someone driving a car worth more than his annual income want to rest in a glorified tool shed? "That's very kind," she said finally, surprising him. "I'd appreciate that. The heat is getting to me more than I expected." James nodded, oddly relieved. "Follow me then. I can give you some water too. Got a refrigerator in there for when I'm working." As they walked toward the shed, he became acutely aware of the sorry state of his property viewed through a stranger's eyes, the failed crops, the peeling paint on the house, the ancient tractor parts scattered near the barn waiting for repairs he couldn't afford. But if the woman noticed these signs of struggle, she gave no indication, instead commenting on the view of the distant mountains visible from his land. "Beautiful country out here," she said. "So open. You can breathe." James grunted in agreement, unlocking the shed door and pushing it open. The interior was surprisingly neat, a testament to his belief that respecting your tools was the first step in respecting your work. A worn but clean couch sat against one wall, his makeshift bed on the nights when he worked too late to justify the walk back to the house. "It's not much," he said, suddenly self-conscious. "But that couch is comfortable enough for a nap if you need it." The woman stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dimmer light. "This is perfect, thank you." She extended her hand. "I'm Alex, by the way." "James Harper," he replied, taking her hand. Her grip was firmer than he expected, a businesslike handshake that seemed at odds with her current lost hiker situation. James retrieved a jug of water from the small refrigerator tucked in the corner and poured some into a clean mason jar. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "Stay hydrated." She accepted the water gratefully, drinking half the jar in one go. "Thank you. I don't think I realized how thirsty I was." "Heat'll do that," James said. "Well, make yourself comfortable. I've got work to do, but feel free to rest as long as you need. Just pull the door closed when you leave." Alex nodded, already settling onto the couch. "I appreciate your kindness, Mr. Harper. Not everyone would offer shelter to a stranger." James shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "It's nothing. Just being neighborly." With that, he left. closing the door behind him to keep the cool air inside. As he walked back toward the fields, James put the strange encounter out of his mind. He had more pressing concerns than a lost hiker taking a nap in his shed. The irrigation system wouldn't fix itself, and he needed to at least try to salvage what he could of the eastern field before the forecast thunderstorms arrived later in the week. Unknown to James, the woman who introduced herself simply as Alex was Alexandra Chen, founder and CEO of Pixel Sync, one of the most innovative technology companies of the past decade. At 38, she had built an empire from a simple idea she'd had in graduate school, an algorithm that revolutionized how digital devices communicated with each other. The past 15 years had been a blur of 18-hour bus workdays, investor meetings, product launches, and increasingly rare moments of actual innovation, the part of her job she actually loved. The company had grown from a team of 5 working out of her apartment to a global enterprise, employing over 15,000 people, with her face gracing the covers of business magazines and her name appearing on lists of the most powerful women in technology. And she was exhausted, bone-deep, soul-tired exhausted. This impromptu road trip had been her first real break in months, an attempt to clear her head after the board meeting that had left her questioning everything. Pixel Sync was preparing to go public, a move that would make her one of the wealthiest women in America overnight. It should have been a triumph, the culmination of everything she'd worked for. Instead, she found herself paralyzed by indecision, unable to sign the final documents that would set the IPO in motion. As she lay on the surprisingly comfortable couch in a stranger's shed, Alexandra closed her eyes, relishing the quiet. No phone calls. She'd deliberately left her phone in the car. No assistants bringing urgent messages. No board members questioning her vision. Just the distant sound of a tractor engine and the occasional rustle of leaves against the metal roof. She hadn't planned to actually sleep, but the combination of the early start, the heat, and the weeks of accumulated stress pulled her under before she could resist. For the first time in years, Alexandra Chen slept deeply and dreamlessly, untroubled by the weight of responsibility that normally followed her even into unconsciousness. When she woke, disoriented in the unfamiliar surroundings, the quality of light filtering through the small window told her several hours had passed. Checking her watch confirmed that she'd slept for nearly 3 hours, longer than any nap she could remember taking since college. Sitting up, Alexandra noticed that while she slept, someone had left a sandwich wrapped in wax paper on the small table beside the couch, along with a fresh jar of water and a note scrawled on the back of a seed company invoice. Asterisk, thought you might be hungry when you woke up. It's just ham and cheese. Nothing fancy. Help yourself to more water if needed. Asterisk, asterisk, JH asterisk. The simple kindness of this gesture from a man who clearly had his own brand. Struggles touched Alexandra in a way she hadn't expected. When was the last time someone had done something for her without an agenda? Without knowing who she was or what she could do for them in return? She unwrapped the sandwich and ate slowly, savoring the homemade bread and the sharp cheddar cheese. Through the window, she could see James in the distance, working on what appeared to be an irrigation pump, his movements betraying his frustration with the uncooperative equipment. As she watched, a pickup truck approached on the dirt road, sending up a cloud of dust. It came to a stop near the farmhouse, and a young woman, not much more than a girl, really climbed out, her body language suggesting exhaustion as she trudged toward the house. Alexandra finished her sandwich and gathered her things, an idea beginning to form in her mind. She'd been struggling with what to do next in her life, feeling trapped by the success that had come to define her. The upcoming IPO would bring her more money than she could spend in a lifetime, but what would it cost her in terms of freedom and purpose? For years, she'd toyed with the idea of stepping back from Pixel Sync, of finding something more meaningful to do with her resources and knowledge. Agricultural technology had always fascinated her grandfather had been a rice farmer in Taiwan before immigrating to the United States, but there had never been time to explore that interest beyond reading the occasional article. Looking at the struggling farm around her, Alexandra felt a stirring of something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Genuine excitement, not the manufactured enthusiasm she mustered for product launches or the satisfaction of closing a major deal, but something more fundamental, a purpose. She left the shed, making sure to close the door securely behind her as requested. Instead of heading directly to her car, she walked toward where James was still wrestling with the CI irrigation equipment, swearing under his breath as he tried to coax life back into the aging machinery. He looked up at her approach, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm. "You're awake. Did you get enough rest?" "More than enough, thank you." "And thank you for the sandwich." James nodded. "Least I could do. You've got a long drive ahead of you." Alexandra glanced at the broken irrigation pump. "Having trouble?" A flash of pride crossed his face, quickly replaced by resignation. "Nothing I can't handle. Just older than dirt, and parts are hard to come by." She recognized the dismissal for what it was. Proud man not wanting to admit the depth of his difficulties to a stranger. Under normal circumstances, she would have respected that boundary, thanked him again for his hospitality, and been on her way. But something about this place, this moment, felt significant in a way she couldn't articulate. Instead of leaving, she found herself saying, "I know a little about mechanical systems. Mind if I take a look?" Surprise registered on his weather-beaten face. "You know about irrigation pumps?" "Not specifically," she admitted, "but mechanical systems often share common principles. I'm good with systems." It was an understatement of epic proportions. Alexandra had 3 engineering degrees and had designed complex integrated systems that were now used in everything from smartphones to satellite communications. An irrigation pump, even an ancient one, was well within her capabilities. James hesitated, then stepped aside with a "be my guest" gesture that suggested he expected little from her intervention. Alexandra knelt beside the pump, examining the connections in the control panel with practiced efficiency. After a few minutes of inspection, she looked up at him. "Your flow regulator is shot, and there's a blockage in the intake valve. The good news is, neither issue is particularly complicated to fix. The bad news is the parts you need aren't cheap." James's expression hardened. "Tell me something I don't know." "You could bypass the regulator temporarily with a pressure-sensitive switch," she continued, ignoring his tone. "It wouldn't be as efficient, but it would get water to your fields until you can replace the proper part." He stared at her, clearly reassessing his initial impression. "And how exactly do you know all this?" Alexandra shrugged. "I'm an engineer by training, among other things." Before James could respond, the young woman Alexandra had seen arriving earlier approached, her expression curious as she took in the seam. "Dad? Everything okay?" Her eyes moved from her father to Alexandra, a question in them. "Fine, Lily. This is Alex." She got lost, looking for Hawks Ridge, and stopped to rest for a bit. James gestured between them. "Alex, my daughter Lily." Alexandra smiled warmly. "Nice to meet you, Lily." Lily returned the smile, though her eyes remained wary. "You too. Did you find what you were looking for?" The question seemed to carry more weight than its surface meaning, and Alexandra found herself answering honestly. "I'm not sure yet, but I'm starting to think I might be on the right track." This cryptic response earned her a raised eyebrow from both Harpers, but neither pressed for clarification. "I should get going," Alexandra said, brushing dust from her hands. "Thank you again for your hospitality." James nodded. "Like I said, just being neighborly. Drive safe." As Alexandra walked back to her car, she could feel their eyes on her, no doubt wondering about the strange woman who'd appeared out of nowhere, slept in their shed, and then demonstrated unexpected knowledge about irrigation systems. Starting her car, she took one last look at the Harper farm, the failing crops, the weathered buildings. The 2 proud people trying to hold it all together against increasingly impossible odds. And she made a decision that would change not only their lives, but her own as well. Instead of heading toward Hawks Ridge, originally planned, Alexandra Chen turned her car toward the nearest city, with reliable internet access. She had research to do and calls to make. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of clarity and purpose. 2 weeks later, James Harper was once again working in his fields, this time attempting to salvage what he could of the corn crop after a particularly violent thunderstorm had flattened several acres. The irrigation system was running again. thanks to his improvised fix, based on the strange woman's suggestion. But the damage from weeks of drought, followed by too much rain at once, was substantial. The sound of tires on the gravel drive made him look up. Squinting against the sun, a familiar silver car was approaching, kicking up dust as it came to a stop near the edge of the field. James straightened, watching as Alexandra Chen emerged, looking very different from the lost hiker he'd met 2 weeks earlier. Gone were the hiking clothes, replaced by a simple but clearly expensive blouse and tailored pants. Her short black hair was neatly styled, and she carried a leather portfolio instead of a trail map. This, James realized, was probably closer to her true self than the woman who had napped in his shed. "Mr. Harper," she called as she approached, navigating the uneven ground with surprising ease in her city shoes. "I was hoping to find you here." James waited for her to reach him, curiosity and wariness battling for dominance in his mind. "Ms. Alex," he acknowledged, "didn't expect to see you again. Did you find your hiking trail?" A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Eventually. But that's not why I'm here today." She glanced around at the damaged cornstalks. "The storm hit you hard, I see." "Nature gives and takes," James replied with the fatalism of a lifelong farmer. "What brings you back to these parts?" Alexandra held up the portfolio. "A proposition, Mr. Harper. One I think might interest you." Before she could elaborate, the rumble of the ancient pickup announced Lily's return. The truck came to a stop nearby, and Lily jumped out, her expression a mixture of surprise and suspicion as she recognized their visitor. "Dad?" she questioned, coming to stand beside her father, a united front. "Ms. Alex has a proposition for us, apparently," James said, his tone carefully neutral. Alexandra nodded to Lily in greeting, then addressed them both. "I wasn't entirely forthcoming when we met. My name is Alexandra Chen. I'm the founder and CEO of Pixel Sync." The name clearly meant nothing to James, but Lily's eyes widened in recognition. "Pixel Sync? The tech company? Your asterisk, that asterisk, Alexandra Chen?" "The same," Alexandra confirmed. "And I'm here because I'm interested in your land, Mr. Harper." James's face hardened instantly. "Not for sale. Never has been, never will be. If that's all you came for, you can get back in your fancy car and keep driving." Alexandra held up a hand. "Please, hear me out. I'm not interested in buying your land out from under you. What I'm proposing is a partnership." This was unexpected enough to give James pause. "Partnership? What kind of partnership could someone like you possibly want with a failing farm?" "A research partnership," Alexandra said, opening her portfolio and extracting several glossy documents. "I've been looking for a place to develop and test new agricultural technology, sustainable irrigation systems, soil monitoring sensors, drone-assisted crop management. Your farm has the perfect combination of diverse terrain, existing infrastructure, and proximity to both rural and urban markets." James took the documents she offered, skepticism written clearly on his face. Lily leaned in to look as well, her expression more open to possibility. "What you're holding is a preliminary proposal," Alexandra continued. "In essence, Pixel Sync would fund the complete modernization of your farm's infrastructure and provide ongoing support for implementing new technologies as they're developed. In return, we'd use a portion of your land as a testing ground and demonstration site for these innovations." "And what happens when you decide your little experiment isn't worth the investment anymore?" James asked, his voice hard. Alexandra met his gaze directly. "The infrastructure improvements would be yours to keep, regardless of how long our partnership lasts. And you'd receive a percentage of any patents or products developed using data from your farm." Lily turned to her father, excitement breaking through her usual reserve. "Dad, do you realize what this could mean? We could actually make the farm profitable again." James remained skeptical, years of hardship having taught him that if something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. "And what's in it for you, Ms. Chen? Why my farm specifically?" It was a fair question, and Alexandra had anticipated it. 3 reasons. First, practically your location is ideal for what I have in mind. Close enough to tech hubs for collaboration, but firmly in real agricultural country. Second, Your farm represents exactly the demographic we want to help: family operations, struggling against corporate agriculture and climate change. She paused, then continued more quietly. And third, personal. I'm at a crossroads in my life, Mr. Harper. I've built a company that's changed how technology works, but I've lost sight of why that matters. When I stumbled onto your farm 2 weeks ago, it was the first time in years I'd felt genuine purpose. Your generosity toward a stranger, despite your own struggles, it reminded me of what's important. James studied her face, looking for signs of deception or hidden motives. Finding none, he turned his attention back to the documents in his hands. This is a lot to take in. I'd need time to think about it, talk to my lawyer. Of course, Alexandra agreed readily. Take all the time you need. My contact information is on the last page. And to show you I'm serious, she reached into her portfolio again and withdrew a check, holding it out to James. This is to cover the cost of proper repairs to your irrigation system. Consider it a good faith advance on our potential partnership. No strings attached, even if you decide my proposal isn't for you. James stared at the check, pride warring with practicality. The amount would cover not only the irrigation repairs, but several other pressing needs around the farm. Dad, Lily said softly, we need this. After a long moment, James reached out and took the check. This doesn't mean I'm agreeing to anything yet, but thank you. Alexandra nodded, understanding the significance of what had just transpired. Thank you for considering it. And for the record, Mr. Harper, I don't think your farm is failing. I think it's been waiting for the right opportunity. With that, she handed Lily her business card. Call me when you've had a chance to review everything, or if you have any questions in the meantime. As Alexandra walked back to her car, she felt lighter than she had in years. The board of Pixel Sync wouldn't understand her vision. Yet a significant investment in agricultural technology was a major pivot from, quote, their core business, but she was still the majority shareholder and had enough personal wealth to fund the initial phases herself if necessary. Looking back at the Harper farm, Alexandra allowed herself to imagine what it could become. A showcase for how technology could serve humanity's most fundamental needs. A place where innovation had purpose beyond profit. A community where she could finally put down roots after years of restless ambition. For the first time since she'd walked away from BIA. Signing the IPO documents, leaving her bored and stunned, Alexandra Chen was certain she'd made the right decision. This wasn't retirement. It was redirection. And as her car pulled away from the farm, she felt not like she was leaving something behind, but like she was finally heading home. James watched the silver car disappear down the rural road, the proposal and check still in his hand. What do you make of all this, Lil? He asked, not taking his eyes off the horizon where dust still marked Alexandra's departure. Lily considered the question seriously. I think it's an opportunity we can't afford to pass up. But I also think you're right to be cautious. She looked down at the business card in her hand, running her thumb over the embossed Pixel Sync logo. I've read about her company. They're huge, Dad. Worth billions, not millions. And she's supposedly some kind of genius. Genius or not, nobody gives something for nothing, James mused. There's got to be an angle we're not seeing. Maybe, Lily conceded. Or maybe she's exactly what she seems, someone looking for meaning beyond making money. She pocketed the business card. Either way, we should at least talk to Mr. Jenkins about the legal side of this. James nodded, folding the proposal carefully and tucking it into his shirt pocket along with the check. We'll sleep on it tonight. No rush decisions. But as they walked back toward the house, James couldn't help but feel a stirring of something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Not the desperate hope that had sustained him through years of increasingly difficult harvests, but something more substantial. A vision of what his farm, his family's legacy could become, if Alexandra Chen's proposition was genuine. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, James sat at the kitchen table with the proposal spread before him, reading every word for the third time. The scope of what Alexandra was suggesting was both exhilarating and terrifying. Complete modernization of his irrigation systems, soil sensors throughout the property, drone and monitoring for crop health, solar panels to reduce energy costs, And that was just the beginning. The financial projections made his head spin numbers, with more zeros than he was accustomed to seeing. According to these estimates, within 3 years, the farm could be not just solvent but profitable in a way it hadn't been since his grandfather's day. James ran a hand over his face, exhaustion and excitement battling for dominance. It felt too good to be true. And yet, there had been something in Alexandra Chen's eyes, a sincerity, a hunger for purpose that resonated with his own deepest desires. Not just to survive, but to build something meaningful. Something that would last beyond his own lifetime. He gathered the papers and placed them back in their folder. His decision not yet made, but his heart leaning toward yes. Tomorrow, he would call Jenkins, the only lawyer in the county who understood both agricultural law and technology contracts. And he would pray that this strange twist of fate was the miracle his family had been needing. 3 days later, James and Lily sat in the modest office of Howard Jenkins, watching as the elderly lawyer peered over his reading glasses at Alexandra Chen's proposal. The office smelled of dusty law books and the coffee that Jenkins consumed, by the gallon, evidenced by the collection of stained mugs littering his desk. "Well," Jenkins said finally, removing his glasses and fixing James with a direct stare. "I've been your family's lawyer for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like this cross my desk." "Is that good or bad?" James asked, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Jenkins leaned back in his creaking chair. "On paper, it's remarkably good. Ms. Chen is offering terms that are not just fair but generous. The intellectual property provisions alone could set up not just you, but Lily for life, if any of these innovations take off commercially." Lily sat up straighter. "So you think we should accept?" "I didn't say that," Jenkins cautioned. "What I said is that the terms are good, but there are broader considerations beyond a legal agreement." "Such as?" James prompted. Jenkins steepled his fingers. "Such as whether you're prepared for the changes this would bring to your way of life. This isn't just a financial arrangement. It's a fundamental shift in how you would operate your farm. New technologies, researchers coming and going, decisions potentially influenced by data rather than instinct and experience." James nodded slowly. These were exactly the concerns that had kept him awake at night since Alexandra's visit. "And then there's the question of Ms. Chen herself," Jenkins continued. "I took the liberty of doing some research. She's a legitimate top prodigy who built PixelSync from nothing into one of the most innovative tech companies in the world. But she's also something of an enigma in business circles. Intensely private, unpredictable by conventional standards. There are rumors that she recently walked away from taking her company public, a move that would have made her one of the wealthiest women in America." "Why would she do that?" Lily asked, fascinated. Jenkins shrugged. "No official statement, but if I had to guess based on what I've read, burnout, disillusionment with the cutthroat nature of the tech industry, a desire to build something with more meaning than another app or gadget." James frowned. "So, you're saying she might lose interest in our partnership just as quickly?" "I'm saying it's a possibility you should consider," Jenkins replied carefully. "But I'm also saying that if her current interest is genuine, you could be partnering with one of the most brilliant innovators of her generation. Someone with the resources and vision to transform not just your farm, but potentially agriculture itself." He picked up the proposal again, tapping it thoughtfully. "Legally, I can tell you this agreement protects your interests remarkably well. The rest, whether to trust Ms. Chen's vision and commit to such a dramatic change, that's a decision only you can make, James." The drive back to the farm was quiet, both Harpers lost in their own thoughts. As they turned onto the long driveway leading to their home, Lily finally broke the silence. "I want to call her," she said simply. "I think we should do this." James glanced at his daughter, struck by the determination in her expression. "You sound certain." "I am," Lily replied. "Dad, we've been hanging on by our fingernails for years. This is more than just financial salvation. It's a chance to be part of something important. To make a difference." She turned to face him fully. "Isn't that why you became a farmer in the first place? To grow things that matter?" End quote. The question hit James like a physical blow. Somewhere along the way, amid the struggle to keep the farm afloat, he had lost sight of that fundamental truth. Farming had never been just about survival for him. It had been about connection to the land, to the cycle of growth and harvest, to the legacy of those who had worked this soil before him. Yes, he admitted softly. That's exactly why. Lily reached over and squeezed his hand. Then let's at least talk to her again. If it doesn't feel right after that, we can walk away. James nodded, his decision crystallizing. All right. Make the call. 2 days later, Alexandra Chen's silver car once again made its way up the Harpers' driveway, this time followed by a more modest rental car containing Howard Jenkins. The meeting was set for 10 o'clock. And James had spent the morning restlessly checking and rechecking that the house was presentable, that coffee was ready, that the kitchen table was cleared for discussion. "Dad, relax," Lily had finally said, exasperated. "She's seen our shed. I don't think she's going to judge us on whether the living room is dusty." Now, as the cars pulled to a stop in front of the house, James straightened his best shirt, the one he usually reserved for church on Sundays, and stepped onto the porch to greet his visitors. Alexandra emerged from her car, looking every inch the successful CEO in a tailored pantsuit, but there was an eagerness in her step that betrayed her professional composure. "Mr. Harper," she called, extending her hand. "Thank you for inviting me back." James shook her hand firmly. "James, please. And thank you for coming on such short notice." Jenkins approached more slowly, his arthritic knees protesting the uneven ground. "Ms. Chen," he acknowledged with a nod. "I'm Howard Jenkins, the Harpers' attorney." "Mr. Jenkins," Alexandra replied, her expression revealing nothing of what she thought about the Harpers bringing legal representation to this meeting. "A pleasure to meet you." Lily appeared in the doorway behind her father. "Ms. Chen, Mr. Jenkins, please come in. I've made coffee, or there's iced tea if you prefer." The four made their way into the Harpers' modest kitchen. Though clean and well-maintained, the room showed signs of age and financial constraints, linoleum peeling at the corners, a refrigerator that hummed too loudly, cabinets that had been repainted too many times to count. James gestured for everyone to sit at the kitchen table, which had been cleared of its usual clutter. Lily poured coffee into mismatched mugs, distributing them before taking her own seat beside her father. "I've reviewed your proposal thoroughly," James began without preamble, "and discussed it with both Lily and Mr. Jenkins here." Alexandra nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. "And what are your thoughts?" James glanced at Lily, who gave him an encouraging nod. "We're interested. Very interested. But we have questions." "Of course," Alexandra replied. "I'd be concerned if you didn't." Jenkins cleared his throat. "Perhaps we could start with understanding your personal stake in this venture, Ms. Chen. This represents a significant departure from Pixel Sync's established business model." Alexandra set her mug down carefully. "You're right, Mr. Jenkins. This is not a typical Pixel Sync initiative. In fact, the company itself will have limited involvement, at least initially." She looked directly at James. "What I'm proposing is primarily funded by me personally, though with access to Pixel Sync's research and development resources when applicable." "Why?" James asked simply. Alexandra considered the question, seeming to weigh how much of herself to reveal. "The short answer is that I've reached a point in my career where I want my work to have more tangible impact. Technology for technology's sake no longer satisfies me." She paused. "The longer answer involves my grandfather, who was a rice farmer in Taiwan before immigrating to the United States. He taught me that the most meaningful innovation addresses our most fundamental needs: food, shelter, community." She leaned forward, her usually controlled demeanor giving way to genuine passion. "The agricultural sector is facing unprecedented challenges: climate change, water scarcity, the consolidation of crack farmland by corporate interests. Small family farms like yours are disappearing at an alarming rate, taking with them generations of knowledge and connection to the land." "And you think technology is the answer?" James asked, not skeptically but curiously. "I think technology can be part of the answer," Alexandra corrected, "when developed in true partnership with farmers, when designed to enhance rather than replace human expertise, when accessible to operations of all sizes, not just the corporate giants. Lily spoke up. And you want our farm to be the testing ground for these ideas? More than that, Alexandra said, turning toward her. I want your farm to be the proving ground, a place where we demonstrate that family farms can not only survive, but thrive in the modern agricultural landscape. If we succeed here, we create a model that can be replicated across the country. Jenkins, who had been taking notes, looked up. The proposal mentions ongoing support for implementing new technologies. Could you elaborate on what that would entail in practical terms? Certainly, Alexandra replied, slipping into a more businesslike tone. In the first phase, we'd focus on modernizing your existing infrastructure, irrigation, equipment, energy systems. This would include bringing in specialists to implement these upgrades and training both of you on their operation and maintenance. She turned a page in her own notes. The second phase would involve introducing new technologies specifically designed for your soil conditions, crop selection, and climate challenges. This would include everything from soil sensors that provide real-time data on moisture and nutrient levels, to drone systems that can identify pest problems before they become visible to the naked eye. And you'd have people coming and going from our property regularly? James asked, his concern evident. Alexandra nodded, understanding his reservation. Initially, yes. There would be a period of intensive activity during the infrastructure upgrades. After that, we'd establish clearer boundaries, designated research areas, scheduled visits, protocols for respecting your privacy and autonomy. She fixed James with a direct look. This is your home, Mr. Harper. You would retain full residential rights and considerable say in how and when research activities are conducted. James absorbed this, turning possibilities over in his mind. And what happens if this doesn't work out? If the technology doesn't perform as expected, or if either of us decides this partnership isn't what we hoped? It was a critical question, and Alexandra appreciated his directness. The agreement includes several exit provisions. Most importantly, any improvements made to your infrastructure remain yours, regardless of how the partnership evolves. The intellectual property arrangements are more complex, but essentially, you would retain royalty rights to any innovations developed using data from your farm, even after a potential separation. Jenkins nodded approvingly. That's consistent with my reading of the proposal. It's unusually equitable in that regard. Alexandra smiled slightly. I have no interest in a partnership where one party feels trapped or exploited, Mr. Jenkins. That benefits no one in the long run. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, delving into specifics of the proposed timeline, budget considerations, potential crops for focus, and the balance between traditional farming methods and technological innovation. Throughout, Alexandra answered each question thoughtfully, neither overselling the potential benefits nor minimizing the challenges ahead. As the meeting wound down, James sat back in his chair, a sense of clarity settling over him. I need to walk the property, he said suddenly. Would you join me, Ms. Chen? Alexandra seemed surprised but nodded readily. Of course. Lily and Jenkins exchanged glances as James led Alexandra out the back door and toward the fields that had been in the Mean Harper family for generations. They walked in companionable silence for several minutes, the midday sun warm on their shoulders. My grandfather bought this land in 1932, James said finally. During the worst of the Depression, everyone thought he was crazy, taking on debt to buy a farm when people were losing their homes left and right. He pointed to an ancient oak tree in the distance. He proposed to my grandmother under that tree. My father was born in the house. I was too. Alexandra listened quietly, understanding that this wasn't just backstory. It was context essential to any decision James would make. When my father passed, he didn't just leave me land, James continued. He left me a responsibility. To care for it, to make it productive, to pass it on better than I found it. He stopped walking and turned to face her. For the past few years, I've been failing at that responsibility. The climate has changed, Alexandra said gently. The economics of farming have changed. That's not failure, James. That's reality. He shook his head stubbornly. Maybe. But the fact remains. If things continue as they are, there won't be anything left to pass on to Lily, even if she wanted it. He gestured toward the drought-damaged fields. And the truth is, I'm not sure she does. She's smart college material. But there's no money for that, and even if there was, you're afraid she'd feel obligated to stay, Alexandra finished for him. James nodded, surprised and somewhat relieved by her perception. She deserves a chance to choose her own path, not be trapped by my failures. Alexandra was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully. What if she could have both? A future that honors this legacy, but isn't constrained by its limitations? She gestured around them. What if this farm could evolve into something that satisfies your need to fulfill your father's trust, and Lily's need to engage with the wider world? It was a compelling vision, and one that resonated deeply with the hopes James had been afraid to articulate even to himself. You really believe that's possible? I do, Alexandra replied without hesitation. But more importantly, I want to find out. With you and Lily as full partners in the discovery. James looked out over his fields, seeing not just what they were, but what they could become. The decision crystallized in his mind, not as a desperate grasp at financial salvation, but as a deliberate step toward a future worth building. All right, Ms. Chen, he said, extending his hand. You've got yourself a partner. Alexandra's smile was genuine as she shook his hand. Alexandra, please. Or Alex. Alexandra. James agreed, the name feeling right for this new, more formal relationship. As they turned back toward the house, James felt something he hadn't experienced in years. A lightness in his step, an eagerness for tomorrow. Whether Alexandra Chen's vision would ultimately succeed remained to be seen, but for the first time in too long, he was walking toward possibility rather than away from failure. Lily was waiting on the porch, her expression anxious, until she saw the relaxed posture of the two returning figures. Well? She called as they approached. James looked at his daughter really. Looked at her seeing not just the child he'd raised, but the woman she was becoming. Bright, determined, deserving of every opportunity. We're going to give it a shot, Lil, he said simply. If you're on board. Lily's face broke into a wide smile. I am. 100%. Jenkins emerged from the house behind her, legal pad in hand. I take it we have an agreement in principle? Alexandra nodded. We do. I'll have my legal team draw up the final contracts based on our discussion today. And I'll review them thoroughly before anything is signed, Jenkins assured James. When can we start? Lily asked, practically bouncing with excitement. Alexandra checked her watch. I have some logistical matters to arrange, but I could have an initial assessment team here as early as next week, if that works for you both. James and Lily exchanged glances, a moment of silent communication passing between them. Next week works, James confirmed. The sooner the better, given the state of the irrigation system. Excellent, Alexandra said. I'll be in touch with specific dates and details in the next day or two. She turned to Jenkins. And I'll ensure all documentation is sent to you directly, Mr. Jenkins. The lawyer nodded approvingly. I appreciate your professionalism, Ms. Chen. As Alexandra prepared to leave, she paused at her car door. This is the beginning of something important, she said, her gaze encompassing both Harpers. Thank you for your trust. James nodded, still somewhat overwhelmed by the magnitude of the change they were embracing. Thank you for seeing possibility where most would see only failure. With a final smile and wave, Alexandra drove away, already making mental notes about the team she would assemble and the resources they would need. The Harpers watched until her car disappeared around the bend, then turned to each other, both a little stunned by the turn their lives had taken. Did we just partner with a tech billionaire to save our farm? Lily asked, laughter bubbling in her voice. James shook his head in wonder. I believe we did. All because I let a stranger take a nap in our shed. The week that followed was a whirlwind of activity for both the Harpers and Alexandra Chen. True to her word, Alexandra had preliminary contracts delivered to Jenkins within 48 hours, along with a detailed timeline for the initial assessment phase. For James and Lily, the days were filled with a frantic effort to prepare the farm for the arrival of Alexandra's team. They cleared years of accumulated equipment from the old barn to create a makeshift office space, organized their meager financial and agricultural records, and discussed long into the night what this partnership might mean for their future? For Alexandra, the week was equally intense. She had difficult conversations with her board of directors, explaining her decision to take an indefinite leave of absence to pursue what she described as an independent research initiative with significant potential applications for PixelSync's long-term growth. The explanation was technically true, if strategically vague. Her longtime COO, Michael Reeves, was less easily placated. "You're throwing away everything we've built for some farming experiment?" he demanded during a tense private meeting. "Alex, the IPO paperwork is literally waiting for your signature. Do you understand the implications of walking away now?" "I understand precisely what I'm doing, Michael," Alexandra replied calmly. "And I'm not walking away from PixelSync. I'm broadening its horizons." Michael ran a hand through his graying hair in frustration. "By personally bankrolling soil sensors and irrigation systems? This is so far outside our core business." "Our core business is innovation that matters," Alexandra interrupted. "And nothing matters more than sustainable food production. Climate change, water scarcity, soil degradation. These are the defining challenges of our time." "Since when are you an agricultural crusader?" Michael asked, his tone softer but still skeptical. "You've spent 15 years building enterprise software and communications protocols." Alexandra smiled slightly. "Since I took a nap in a farmer's shed and remembered why I became an engineer in the first place. To solve real problems, not just to make money." Michael studied her face, recognizing the determination that had built their company from nothing. "There's no talking you out of this, is there?" "No," Alexandra confirmed. "But I'm not asking you to understand yet, just to keep things running while I explore this opportunity." In the end, Michael grudgingly agreed to maintain operations during her absence, extracting a promise that she would check in regularly and reconsider the IPO question in 6 months' time. With PixelSync temporarily settled, Alexandra turned her attention to assembling her team for the Harper project. She needed people who combined technical expertise with practical agricultural knowledge and, perhaps most importantly, the ability to work respectfully with farmers like James, who had generations of hands-on experience. Her first call was to Dr. Priya Sharma, an agricultural engineer she'd met at a climate technology conference 3 years earlier. Priya had impressed Alexandra with her pragmatic approach to innovation, designing systems that worked with, rather than against, traditional farming practices. "Let me get this straight," Priya said, after Alexandra outlined her proposal. "You want me to leave my comfortable university position to help you turn a struggling family farm into a showcase for agricultural technology?" "Essentially, yes," Alexandra confirmed. There was a pause, then Priya laughed. "When do I start?" Next, Alexandra recruited Marcus Washington, a soil scientist whose research on regenerative agriculture had revolutionized understanding of microbial ecosystems in farm soil. His expertise would be crucial for developing the sensor systems Alexandra envisioned. For the data analytics component, she turned to Wei Zhang, a former PixelSync employee who had left 2 years earlier to start his own environmental monitoring company. Wei brought not only technical brilliance, but a deep understanding of how to translate complex data into actionable insights for non-technical users. Rounding out the core team was Eleanor Rodriguez, a sustainable irrigation specialist whose designs had reduced water usage by 60% on drought-prone farms across the Southwest. Elena's practical experience would be invaluable in addressing the Harper farm's most immediate challenge. By the end of the week, Alexandra had assembled a group of 12 experts spanning various disciplines, all united by a shared vision of technology in service to sustainable agriculture. She scheduled a virtual meeting to brief them on the project's scope and objectives, emphasizing the importance of approaching this partnership with humility and respect. "James and Lily Harper know their land in ways we never will," she told the team. "Our role is to augment their knowledge with our expertise, not replace their judgment with our algorithms. This isn't about imposing technology, it's about co-creating solutions." As the call ended, Alexandra felt a surge of excitement. After years of building abstract digital systems, she was about to work on something tangible, something fundamental to human survival and well-being. The challenges ahead were enormous, but for the first time in a long time, she felt fully alive to her purpose. On Monday morning, precisely 1 week after their agreement in principle, a small convoy of vehicles made its way up the Harpers' driveway. Alexandra led the procession in her now familiar silver car, followed by 2 SUVs containing the assessment team and their equipment. James and Lily stood on the porch, watching as the cars parked in the cleared area near the barn. The scale of what they had agreed to suddenly felt very real as people began emerging from the vehicles, unloading cases of equipment, and talking animatedly among themselves. "You okay, Dad?" Lily asked quietly, sensing her father's tension. James nodded, squaring his shoulders. "Just wondering what your grandfather would make of all this." Lily slipped her arm through his. "I think he'd be proud. You're fighting for his land, just in a new way." Before James could respond, Alexandra approached, accompanied by a tall woman with streaks of gray in her dark hair. "James, Lily, good morning," Alexandra greeted them. "I'd like you to meet Dr. Priya Sharma, our lead agricultural engineer. She'll be coordinating much of the assessment phase." Priya stepped forward with a warm smile, extending a hand that bore the calluses of someone who didn't just study farming but practiced it. "It's a pleasure to meet you both. Alexandra has told me so much about your farm." James shook her hand, noting the strength in her grip. "Welcome to Harper Farm, Dr. Sharma. Though there's not much to see this season, I'm afraid." "Please, call me Priya," she insisted. "And actually, even struggling fields can tell us a great deal about soil conditions, water distribution patterns, and microclimatic factors. Your challenges are valuable data points." And that practical perspective eased some of James's tension. This wasn't someone who would look down on his failing crops but see them as information to be analyzed and addressed. Alexandra gestured toward the barn. "We thought we'd set up our base of operations there, if that still works for you. Today is mostly about getting oriented and starting some preliminary assessments." "The barn's all set up," Lily confirmed. "I cleared space for workstations like you suggested and ran extension cords for power." "Perfect." Alexandra nodded approvingly. "Lily, would you mind showing Priya and the team where everything is while I go over some paperwork with your father?" As Lily led Priya toward the barn, the rest of the team gathering their equipment to follow, Alexandra turned to James with a folder in hand. "Jenkins approved the final contracts. I brought copies for your records, all signed on my end." James accepted the folder, flipping it open to see the documents inside, each bearing Alexandra's precise signature. "It's really happening, isn't it?" "It is," she confirmed. "Having second thoughts?" He closed the folder, meeting her gaze directly. "No, but it's a big step. Change doesn't come easy to farmers." Alexandra smiled understandingly. "Nor to tech executives who suddenly decide to pivot to agricultural innovation. We're both stepping into unknown territory, James." This acknowledgement of shared vulnerability seemed to reassure him. "Well then, let's get to it. Those fields won't fix themselves." Over the next 2 weeks, the Harper farm buzzed with more activity than it had seen in decades. The assessment team meticulously documented every aspect of the property soil composition, water sources, existing infrastructure, crop history, and environmental factors. James found himself both impressed and occasionally overwhelmed by the thoroughness of their approach. Every field was gridded and sampled, every piece of equipment evaluated, every building assessed for potential repurposing. Lily, meanwhile, thrived in the new environment. She shadowed different team members each day, absorbing knowledge like a sponge and impressing even the most specialized experts with her quick understanding and insightful questions. "Your daughter has a remarkable mind," Priya commented to James as they watched Lily deepen conversation with Marcus Washington, the soil scientist. "Has she considered studying agricultural science or engineering?" James sighed. "She's considered everything. But college costs money we don't have." Priya's eyebrows rose. "Has Alexandra discussed educational opportunities with you as part of this partnership?" "Not specifically," James replied, surprised by the question. "Why? You should ask her," Priya suggested. "Education and training are typically integral to projects of this nature, and from what I've seen, investing in Lily's education would benefit this initiative substantially." This conversation planted a seed in James's mind that would continue to grow over the coming days. Meanwhile, Alexandra herself was less visible during this initial phase, dividing her time between the farm and the temporary office she'd established in the nearby town. There were countless logistical matters requiring her attention: equipment orders, permit applications, coordination with local utilities, and regular check-ins with Pixel Sync to ensure the company wasn't imploding in her partial absence. On the Friday of the second week, as the assessment phase was winding down, Alexandra arrived at the farm earlier than usual. She found James already at work in the eastern field, attempting to coax life from a tractor that had seen better days. "Morning," she called, approaching with 2 travel mugs of coffee. "But you might need this." James straightened, wiping grease from his hands onto an already stained rag. "Thanks," he said, accepting the offered mug. "You're here early." "Big day," Alexandra replied, leaning against the tractor's massive wheel. "The team's finalizing their assessment report. We'll have our first comprehensive picture of what we're working with." James nodded, taking a sip of the coffee strong and black, just as he preferred it. He'd noticed early on that Alexandra paid attention to details like that. And then we develop our implementation plan," she said. "Priorities, timeline, budget allocation. I'd like you and Lily to be central to those decisions." "Speaking of Lily," James began, remembering Priya's suggestion. "She's been spending a lot of time with your team. Seems to have a knack for this sort of work." Alexandra smiled. "More than a knack. Your daughter has exceptional analytical skills and an intuitive understanding of agricultural systems. Several team members have commented on it." James hesitated, then pressed forward. "Priya mentioned something about educational opportunities as part of the partnership." "Ah." Alexandra's smile widened. "I was wondering when this might come up." She pulled a folded document from her jacket pocket. "I've been working on a scholarship proposal. Full tuition at the agricultural engineering program of Lily's choice, with guaranteed internships at Pixel Sync's new AG Tech division during summer breaks." James stared at the document she offered, stunned by its implications. "You'd do that for her?" "For her, for the project, for the future of agricultural technology," Alexandra replied. "Talented young people with both technological aptitude and farming background are extraordinarily rare, James. Investing in Lily's education isn't charity, it's good business sense." James took the document, emotion threatening to overcome his usual stoicism. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll discuss it with her," Alexandra suggested gently. "The choice should be hers, of course, but the opportunity is there if she wants it." Before James could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both turn. Lily was jogging toward them, excitement evident in her expression. "Dad! Alexandra! You need to come to the barn," she called. "Marcus and Elena have found something important about the water table under the western fields." James and Alexandra exchanged glances, both recognizing the significance of this discovery. The western fields had been the first to fail when the drought intensified, despite historically being the most productive section of the farm. "We'll be right there," Alexandra replied, pushing away from the tractor. As they followed Lily toward the barn, she added quietly to James, "One step at a time. We'll figure out the education piece as we go." James nodded, tucking the scholarship proposal into his shirt pocket, next to his heart. The future suddenly seemed full of possibilities he hadn't dared consider even a month ago. Inside the barn, the assessment team had gathered around a large digital display showing a 3-dimensional map of the Harper property. Marcus Washington, the soil scientist, was pointing to a blue section beneath the western fields. "It's an aquifer," he explained, as James and Alexandra joined them. "A previously unmapped water source, approximately 60 feet below the surface." Eleanor Rodriguez, the irrigation specialist, picked up the explanation. "Based on our preliminary analysis, it's a substantial reservoir, potentially enough to sustain these fields even during extended drought conditions." James frowned. "That can't be right. We drilled wells on that side of the property years ago and came up dry." Marcus nodded. "You didn't go deep enough. The geological survey from that time indicated bedrock at 50 feet, which would have made further drilling seem pointless." But our ground-penetrating radar shows a fault line that creates access to the aquifer at approximately 62 feet, Elena continued. It's not your fault you missed it, Mr. Harper. Without this technology, there would have been no way to know. James absorbed this information, a mixture of emotions crossing his face, frustration at having been so close to a solution all these years, relief that the water was actually there, hope for what this might mean for the farm's future. Alexandra stepped closer to the display, studying the image. Can we access it sustainably, without depleting the aquifer or causing land subsidence? That's the real question, Marcus agreed. And it's why we're recommending a carefully monitored test well as our first major implementation project. Priya, who had been quietly observing, added, if the aquifer is as substantial as it appears, we could design a precision irrigation system that draws only what's needed, when it's needed, allowing natural replenishment to maintain equilibrium. And if we combine that with moisture-retaining soil amendments in the most vulnerable areas, Marcus continued, warming to the collaborative problem-solving, we could significantly reduce the required water volume while improving soil health. James listened to this exchange with growing amazement. In the span of minutes, these experts had not only identified a critical resource he'd never known existed on his own land, but were already developing a comprehensive strategy to utilize it responsibly. How soon could we start? He asked, the farmer in him acutely aware that planting season for next year's crops was approaching rapidly. Alexandra looked to Elena, who consulted her tablet briefly. We could have a test well drilled within 2 weeks. Initial soil amendments could begin immediately after harvest clearance. Full irrigation system implementation would take longer, probably 3 to 4 months, depending on weather conditions and equipment availability. End quote. Just in time for spring planting, Lily observed, excitement clear in her voice. Potentially, yes, Priya confirmed. Though I would recommend a phased approach for the first season. Perhaps focus on restoring the western fields to full production while implementing monitoring systems throughout the property. James nodded slowly, his farmer's caution warring with newfound optimism. Start small, get it right, then expand. Makes sense. Alexandra turned to him, recognizing the significance of this moment. This is just the beginning, James, the first of many discoveries that will help restore your farm's productivity, but every step will be your decision, guided by your knowledge of this land. The sincerity in her voice solidified something in James. This wasn't some corporate takeover disguised as assistance. This was a genuine partnership, combining his generational knowledge with cutting-edge science to preserve what his family had built. All right then, he said, straightening his shoulders. Let's drill that well and see what we're working with. The room broke into enthusiastic planning, team members clustering to discuss logistics, equipment needs, and timeline adjustments. James stepped back slightly, watching as Lily seamlessly joined one of these discussions, contributing ideas that were received with respect by professionals twice her age. Alexandra came to stand beside him. Quite a morning, she commented quietly. Quite a morning, James agreed. Thank you. She looked at him curiously. For what, specifically? James gestured toward the animated group, toward his daughter in the midst of it all, toward the blue shimmer on the digital display that represented hope flowing beneath his failing fields. For seeing what I couldn't, he said simply. Alexandra smiled, understanding all he wasn't saying. That's what partners do. The discovery of the aquifer marked a turning point in the Harper Farm initiative. What had begun as a somewhat abstract partnership suddenly had a concrete focus accessing this hidden resource in a way that would sustainably revitalize the most productive section of the property. The next month saw a flurry of activity as Alexandra's team moved from assessment to implementation. The test well was drilled, confirming both the existence and quality of the underground water source. Soil amendments were applied to the recently harvested fields, the first step in restoring years of drought damage. Plans for the precision irrigation system were finalized, with components ordered and contractors scheduled. For James, the process was both exhilarating and disorienting. After years of making every decision alone, constrained by limited resources and information, he now found himself part of a collaborative effort with seemingly boundless expertise and funding at its disposal. He struggled occasionally with the pace of change, with the transformation of familiar spaces, with the feeling that the farm he'd known his entire life was becoming something new and not entirely recognizable. But in quieter moments, observing Lily's blooming confidence or seeing the first signs of soil recovery in fields he'd nearly given up on, he found his reservations giving way to cautious hope. Alexandra, meanwhile, found herself more deeply engaged in the project than she had initially anticipated. What had begun as a redirection of her professional focus on escape from the corporate treadmill that had consumed her life was becoming a genuine passion. She still managed her Pixel Sync responsibilities remotely, spent one day each week at the company's regional office, and held regular video conferences with Michael and the board. But increasingly, her creative energy and problem-solving focus were directed toward the challenges of the Harper farm. One crisp autumn evening, as sunset painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Alexandra found herself walking the perimeter of the property alone, tablet in hand, making notes on potential locations for solar panels to power the new irrigation system. The solitude was a welcome change from the constant demands on her attention, allowing her thoughts to wander beyond immediate logistical concerns. "Penny for your thoughts." The voice startled her from her reverie. James stood a few yards away, hands in the pockets of his well-worn jacket, his expression curious. "I doubt they're worth that much," Alexandra replied with a small smile. "Just planning solar placement." James came to stand beside her, looking out over the fields that were beginning to show the first subtle signs of renewal. "Beautiful evening." "It is," she agreed, tucking the tablet under her arm. "Your land catches the light magnificently at this hour." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, two people from vastly different worlds, finding unexpected common ground in the shared appreciation of a sunset over farmland. "Lily got an email today," James said finally. "From State University. They've invited her to tour the agricultural engineering department. Seems they're very interested in her application." Alexandra nodded, unsurprised. "I may have made a few calls, but the interest is genuine. Her test scores are exceptional, and her practical experience is rare among applicants her age." "She's excited," James admitted. "Scared too, I think. It's a big step." "It is," Alexandra agreed. "But she won't be going alone. The scholarship includes mentorship from several women in agricultural technology, including Priya, and the internship at Pixel Sync will provide a community of peers during summer breaks." James turned to look at her directly. "Why are you doing all this? And don't tell me it's just good business sense. There's more to it." Alexandra considered the question, weighing her usual professional reserve against the growing trust between them. "When I was Lily's age, I had opportunities, parents who valued education, scholarships, mentors who saw my potential. Not everyone does. The talent that goes undeveloped because of financial barriers or lack of access. She shook her head. "It's not just a personal loss. It's a societal one." She paused, then continued more quietly. "And perhaps I see something of myself in her. The analytical mind, the drive to understand systems, the desire to build things that matter." James nodded slowly, accepting this explanation. "She admires you, you know, not just for the obvious reasons, the success, the resources, but for how you think, how you approach problems." "The admiration is mutual," Alexandra replied honestly. "Her intuitive understanding of this land, her willingness to bridge traditional knowledge and new technologies, those qualities are invaluable." Another comfortable silence fell between them as the last rays of sunlight faded from the horizon. In the growing darkness, the boundaries between tech executive and farmer, employer and employee, seemed to dissolve, leaving just two people contemplating the future of the land before them. "We should head back," James said eventually. "Lily's making dinner. You're welcome to join us, if you don't have other plans." The invitation was casually offered but represented a significant shift. Until now, their interactions had remained largely professional, confined to project-related discussions and decisions. "I'd like that," Alexandra replied, surprised by how much she meant it. The prospect of a simple dinner in a farmhouse kitchen, suddenly seemed more appealing than any of the exclusive restaurants she'd frequented in her previous life. As they walked back toward the lights of the farmhouse, Alexandra found herself reflecting on how much had changed in the 2 months since she'd taken that unplanned nap in James's shed. What had begun as a search for personal meaning, amid professional success, had evolved into something more complex and fulfilling than she could have anticipated. She glanced at the man walking beside her, weathered, proud, adapting to change while holding firm to what mattered most. In him, she recognized a kindred spirit, someone who understood the value of building something that would outlast themselves. The realization brought with it a sense of rightness, of being precisely where she was meant to be. Not retired, not escaped, but engaged in work that challenged her mind while nourishing her soul. And perhaps, though she was not yet ready to examine this thought too closely, building connections that went beyond professional collaboration. As they reached the porch, the warm light from within spilling out to greet them, Alexandra Shentek, visionary, reluctant billionaire, seeker of purpose, felt something settle within her. The path ahead was neither clear nor certain, but for the first time in years, it was undeniably her own. Dinner at the Harper farmhouse that evening marked a subtle but significant shift in the relationship between Alexandra and the Harpers. The conversation flowed easily from project logistics to Lily's university prospects to James's memories of the farm in more prosperous times. For once, Alexandra found herself talking about her own background, her childhood in California, her grandfather's stories of farming in Taiwan, her early fascination with systems and how they could be improved. "So, you were always a fixer," Lily observed, passing a bowl of homemade apple crumble across the table. Alexandra considered this characterization. "I suppose I was, though fixing implies something was broken. I've always been more interested in optimizing, in finding the potential in systems that aren't functioning at their best capacity. Like our farm," James A.S. said quietly. Alexandra nodded. "Like your farm, but also like my company. Like most things in life, really." She took a bite of the crumble, savoring the tart sweetness. "This is delicious, by the way. Mom's recipe," Lily explained, a flicker of old sadness crossing her face. "Dad's hopeless in the kitchen, so I had to learn all her recipes after she passed." "Your mother would be proud," James said, reaching across to squeeze his daughter's hand briefly. "Of everything you've become." The moment of family connection reminded Alexandra of her own relative isolation. For all her professional success, her personal life had been largely sacrificed to the demands of building Pixel Sync. Friends had drifted away as her availability dwindled. Romantic relationships had faltered under the weight of her impossible schedule and singular focus. "Do you miss it?" Lily asked suddenly. "The tech world, I mean. All that excitement and innovation." Alexandra smiled. "What makes you think there's any less innovation happening here? We're literally redesigning how a farm functions, integrating cutting-edge technology with generations of agricultural knowledge. That's every bit as exciting as developing a new app or device." Her answer clearly pleased Lily, whose expression brightened. "I never thought of farming as high-tech before all this. At school, people talk about agriculture like it's stuck in the past, like it's what you do if you can't do anything else. That perception is precisely what we need to change," Alexandra replied, warming to the topic. "Food production is the most fundamental technology humans have ever developed. Without it, nothing else, not smartphones, not social media, not space exploration, would be possible." James watched this exchange with quiet interest, noting the animated way Alexandra spoke, so different from her usual measured professional tone. There was passion here, genuine conviction. Perhaps her interest in agricultural technology wasn't merely an escape from corporate burnout, but a calling she'd never had the opportunity to pursue. The conversation continued late into the evening, ranging from practical matters like the upcoming well implementation to broader discussions about the future of farming in a changing climate. When Alexandra finally rose to leave, the kitchen clock showed nearly midnight. "I had no idea it was so late," she said, genuinely surprised. "I should let you both get some rest." James walked her to the door, where she paused before stepping out into the cool night air. Thank you for dinner. And for the conversation. It's been refreshing. James nodded, understanding what she wasn't quite saying. Anytime. We farm folk may not know much about IPOs and algorithms, but we do know how to sit around a table and talk. Her smile in response was softer than her usual professional expression. Good night, James. Good night, Alexandra. As she drove the now familiar route back to her rented cottage in town, Alexandra found herself replaying moments from the evening, Lily's enthusiastic questions about agricultural engineering programs, James's quiet pride as he described the farm's history, the simple pleasure of sharing a meal prepared with care. These were the experiences she'd been missing in her relentless pursuit of technological innovation and market dominance. Connections, community, purpose beyond profit. The realization both satisfied and unsettled her, suggesting that her impulse to step away from Pixel Sync's IPO had been about more than professional burnout. It had been about reclaiming parts of herself that had been neglected for too long. The weeks that followed saw steady progress on the Harper Farm initiative. The test well proved even more promising than initial readings had suggested, yielding clean, abundant water from the hidden aquifer. Soil remediation efforts began showing measurable results, with nutrient levels improving in the treated sections. Plans for the comprehensive irrigation system moved from design to implementation, with the first components arriving for installation. Throughout this period, the dynamic between Alexandra and the Harpers continued to evolve. What had begun as a formal business arrangement gradually took on qualities of genuine partnership and growing friendship. Alexandra joined them for dinner at least once a week. James found himself consulting her on matters beyond the immediate scope of the project. Lily increasingly looked to Alexandra as a mentor, seeking her guidance on everything from university applications to career planning. For Alexandra, these developing relationships provided a sense of connection she hadn't experienced since the earliest days of Pixel Sync, when the company had been small enough for genuine camaraderie among its founding team. She found herself looking forward to her time at the farm, not just for the professional satisfaction of seeing the project advance, but for the personal fulfillment of being part of something meaningful and rooted. This shift did not go unnoticed by her team. Priya, in particular, observed the changing dynamic with quiet interest. One afternoon, as she and Alexandra were reviewing irrigation system specifications in the Bard office, she broached the subject directly. "You seem different here," Priya remarked, setting aside her tablet. "More present." Alexandra looked up, surprised by the personal observation from her usually task-focused colleague. "Different how?" Priya considered her words carefully. "At Pixel Sync, you were always slightly removed, always calculating the next 3 moves in a game no one else could see. Here, you're engaged in a different way, more connected to the immediate reality." The assessment was uncomfortably perceptive. "The stakes feel more tangible here," Alexandra admitted after a moment. At Pixel Sync, success was measured in market share and quarterly revenue. Important metrics, certainly, but abstract. Here, success or failure shows up in the soil, in the crops, in whether a family loses their crop, heritage, or preserves it. "And in the people," Priya added gently. "You've grown fond of the Harpers." It wasn't a question, and Alexandra didn't treat it as one. "They're remarkable people. James has more wisdom about sustainable systems than most of the tech visionaries I've worked with, though he'd never used those terms. And Lily," she smiled. "Lily could be running Pixel Sync someday, if that's what she wanted." Priya nodded, accepting this response without pressing further. But the conversation lingered in Alexandra's mind long after they'd returned to their technical discussion. She had indeed grown fond of the Harpers, of James's quiet strength and practical intelligence, of Lily's curious mind and determined spirit. And perhaps, though she was reluctant to examine this thought too closely, her feelings for James were evolving into something more complex than mere professional respect or friendship. The possibility both intrigued and alarmed her. A personal entanglement had not been part of her plan when she'd embarked on this project. It would complicate the clean narrative of professional redirection she'd constructed for herself, and potentially undermine the legitimate business purposes she'd cited to her board. And yet, She couldn't deny the sense of rightness she felt in James's company, the easy understanding that had developed between them, despite their vastly different backgrounds. These thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of James himself, bringing news that the drilling team had hit an unexpected layer of rock while installing the main well housing. As they shifted into problem-solving mode, Alexandra set aside her personal reflections, focusing on the immediate engineering challenge. But the awareness remained, a quiet undercurrent beneath the technical discussions and logistical decisions of the day. For James Harper, the transformation of his farm was accompanied by an equally significant internal shift. The constant strain of impending failure that had been his companion for years began to ease, replaced by cautious optimism about the future. He found himself thinking beyond immediate survival for the first time in a long while, considering crop rotations for the coming years, planning infrastructure improvements beyond those funded by the partnership, even allowing himself to imagine the farm thriving long enough for Lily to someday take it over, should she choose to. And increasingly, his thoughts included Alexandra Chen. Her presence had become a fixed point in his daily routine: morning strategy meetings in the barn office, midday check-ins at whichever site was most active, occasional shared meals at the kitchen table she had once considered too humble for someone of her stature. He'd come to appreciate her unique combination of brilliant analytical thinking and practical problem-solving, her ability to translate complex technological concepts into terms that connected with his experiential knowledge of the land. More surprising was her willingness to listen, to incorporate his insights into the design process, rather than imposing solutions developed in isolation from the realities of farming life. Beyond these professional qualities, he found himself drawn to the person behind the accomplished CEO, the woman who sometimes stood in his fields at dawn, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise with an expression of wonder, who engaged Lily in serious discussions about everything from irrigation algorithms to science fiction novels, who had begun to reveal, in brief unguarded moments, the weight of responsibility she had carried for Grawl. So long at the helm of her company, these feelings both confused and concerned him. Alexandra Chen existed in a world so different from his own that any personal connection seemed improbable at best. And yet, there was something undeniable growing between them, a mutual respect that had deepened into genuine affection, and perhaps something more. One particularly challenging day, when equipment failures and permit delays had threatened the irrigation system timeline, James found Alexandra sitting alone on the porch steps of the farmhouse, staring out at the setting sun with uncharacteristic stillness. "Rough day," he commented, sitting down beside her. "Not my finest," she agreed with a small smile. "But we'll recover. The new parts will be here tomorrow, and I've called in a favor with the county permit office." James nodded, appreciating her resilience. "It's just time and money. We've got plenty of both now, thanks to you." She turned to look at him directly. "You know, in all my years in business, I've never heard anyone say it's just time and money with such genuine perspective. In my previous world, delays cost millions and could sink entire projects. Different stakes. DI," James said simply. "I've watched crops fail because of a week's delay in rain. Equipment problems are frustrating, but they don't keep me up at night anymore." He paused, then added more quietly, "Other things do, though." Alexandra's expression grew curious. "What kind of things?" James hesitated, unaccustomed to sharing his inner thoughts. But something about the fading light and the shared fatigue of a difficult day created a space for honesty. "Lily's future," he began. "Whether she'll go to college and never want to come back, whether this farm will still be here if she does, whether I'm doing right by my father's legacy." He took a breath. "Whether the changes we're making are the right ones." Alexandra listened without interrupting, giving his concerns the respect they deserved. "Change always involves risk," she said finally. "But standing still when the world is transforming around you, that's the greater risk. You recognized that when you agreed to this partnership." "It wasn't just about the money," James admitted. "Though God knows we needed it. It was—" He searched for words to express what had prompted him to trust this stranger with his family's heritage. "It was the vision, the idea that this land could be more than just surviving, that it could lead the way to something better. That's what drew me too," Alexandra said softly. a chance to build something meaningful, something that addresses real needs. She looked out at the fields, where the first signs of the new irrigation system were visible. "I've created products used by millions, platforms that changed how technology functions. But none of it felt as tangible, as necessary, as what we're doing here." The simple truth of this statement hung between them in the deepening twilight. For a moment, the vast differences in their backgrounds and circumstances seemed to fade, revealing a shared core of values, a belief in stewardship, in building for the future, in the dignity of work that sustains. Without conscious thought, James found his hand moving to cover hers, where it rested on the worn wooden step between them. Alexandra looked down at their joined hands, then back to his face, surprise giving way to something softer, more vulnerable than he had ever seen in her expression. "James," she began, uncertainty in her voice. Before she could continue, the sound of Lily's pickup returning from town broke the moment. They separated naturally, standing as the truck pulled up to the house. "We should check on those revised irrigation specs," Alexandra said, her professional demeanor reasserting itself. James nodded, recognizing and respecting her retreat to safer ground. "Tomorrow. You've done enough for today." As Lily approached, calling out greetings and news from town, the moment passed. But something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of possibilities that neither was quite ready to pursue, but could no longer entirely ignore. The following weeks brought both progress and new challenges to the Harper Farm initiative. The main well installation was completed successfully, providing access to the hidden aquifer that would transform the western fields. The first sections of the precision irrigation system were installed and tested, demonstrating the water-saving potential of the technology. Preliminary designs for a solar array to power these systems were finalized, with installation scheduled to begin before winter. Throughout this period of intense activity, Alexandra and James maintained a careful professional relationship, neither referring to the moment of connection they had shared on the porch steps. But an undercurrent of awareness ran beneath their daily interactions, an extra moment of eye contact during meetings, a lingering conversation after the team had dispersed, small kindnesses exchanged without, quote, fanfare. Lily, perceptive beyond her years, noticed this subtle change, but chose not to comment directly. Instead, she found ways to create opportunities for Alexandra and her father to work together, suggesting collaborative tasks that required their joint expertise or arranging informal dinners at the farmhouse that naturally extended into evening conversations. For Alexandra, these developing feelings presented a professional complication she had not anticipated. The Harper Farm project, while personal in its inception, was still fundamentally a business initiative, one she had convinced her board to support as a strategic expansion into agricultural technology. A romantic involvement with James could potentially undermine the legitimacy of the project in the eyes of her Pixel Sync colleagues and investors. And yet, she found herself increasingly drawn to the possibility. In James Harper, she had found someone who challenged her in unexpected ways, whose perspective on success and failure, on purpose and legacy, resonated with questions she had been asking herself since long before she'd stumbled onto his farm that summer day. These thoughts preoccupied her one crisp November morning as she drove toward the farm for a scheduled meeting with the newly assembled solar installation team. The leaves had turned to brilliant reds and golds, transforming the rural landscape into a canvas of autumn colors. The Harper property itself seemed renewed, the recently harvested fields already showing signs of recovery from years of drought stress, thanks to the soil remediation efforts initiated months earlier. As Alexandra parked near the barn that now served as the project headquarters, she noticed an unfamiliar luxury SUV already in the lot. Curious, she made her way to the office space, where raised voices immediately caught her attention. "Completely unrealistic expectations," a male voice was saying as she opened the door. "The board is losing patience, Alex." Michael Reeves, her COO, stood in the center of the room, tablet in hand, facing a visibly uncomfortable James and an annoyed-looking Priya. He turned at Alexandra's entrance, relief quickly replaced by determination on his face. "There you are. We need to talk. Now." Alexandra maintained her composure, though inwardly she was furious at this uninvited intrusion. "Michael, This is unexpected. It shouldn't be, he replied tersely. You've been ignoring my calls and messages for days. The board meeting is in 2 days, and we have precisely nothing to show for this agricultural experiment. Alexandra glanced at James, whose expression had hardened into the familiar mask he wore when feeling defensive or outmatched. James, Priya, would you excuse us for a moment? Priya nodded immediately, but James hesitated. You sure? The simple question, the implicit offer of support, touched Alexandra deeply. I'm sure. I'll find you when we're done. As they left, closing the door behind them, Alexandra turned to her longtime colleague and friend. That was completely inappropriate, Michael. You don't show up at a partner's location and create a scene. Michael ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Inappropriate? Alex, you've sunk millions of personal funds and company resources into this project, with no clear ROI. The board is asking questions I can't answer. The IPO window is closing, and you're out here playing farmer with your new friends. The pause before the last word carried clear implications. Careful, Alexandra warned, her voice dangerously quiet. You're making assumptions and accusations that are beneath you. Michael had the grace to look slightly abashed, but pressed on. Look, personal feelings aside, the fact remains that Pixel Sync needs direction. The executive team needs to know if you're coming back to lead the company through the IPO, or if we need to start considering succession plans. The blunt assessment hit Alexandra like a physical blow. She had founded Pixel Sync, built it from concept to industry leader, poured 15 years of her life into its growth. The idea that the company was preparing for her permanent departure, even though she had been contemplating exactly that, felt like a betrayal. I've been clear with the board, she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. This agricultural technology initiative is a strategic expansion, not a personal diversion. The potential applications for our core technologies in sustainable agriculture represent a multi-billion-dollar market opportunity. Michael sighed, his expression softening slightly. Alex, I know you believe that, and maybe in the long term, you're right, but the board needs results now. Timelines, projections, concrete applications that connect directly to our existing product ecosystem. He gestured around the modest office space. What I see here is a localized infrastructure project for a single struggling farm, not a scalable technology initiative. If there's more to it than that, you need to demonstrate it clearly and convincingly at SE. Thursday's board meeting. Alexandra felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. She had been so immersed in the immediate challenges and rewards of the Harper project that she had neglected the critical task of translating its value for her Pixel Sync colleagues. Michael was right from their perspective. She had veered off course, pursuing a personal interest at the company's expense. I'll be there, she said finally. With a comprehensive presentation on the agricultural technology strategy and its connection to Pixel Sync's core business. Michael's relief was palpable. Good, that's all I'm asking. He hesitated, then added more gently, for what it's worth, I hope you're right about this. I just can't see it yet. After Michael departed, Alexandra remained in the office alone, attempting to gather her thoughts. The confrontation had forced a reckoning she had been avoiding for months, the fundamental disconnect between her growing personal commitment to the Harper Farm initiative and her long-standing professional responsibilities to Pixel Sync. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. James entered, concern evident in his expression. Everything okay? Not exactly, Alexandra admitted, too drained for pretense. That was my COO. The Pixel Sync board is questioning the strategic value of this project. I need to present a compelling case for its continuation at Thursday's meeting in New York. James absorbed this information, his face unreadable. And if you can't? The question hung heavily between them, laden with implications for the farm, for their partnership, for the tentative personal connection that had been developing. Alexandra chose her words carefully, aware of the weight they carried. This project is funded through initial phases regardless of the board's opinion, she assured him. The contract guarantees that. But for long-term sustainability, for expansion beyond this property, for the broader vision we've discussed, I need institutional support. Or I need to consider other arrangements. Other arrangements, James repeated. Such as? Alexandra took a deep breath. Such as leaving Pixel Sync altogether and pursuing agricultural technology development independently. The possibility, which had existed as a vague contingency in her mind, solidified as she spoke it aloud. I have sufficient personal resources to fund an initiative of this scale without corporate backing. James studied her face. Is that what you want? It was the central question, the one she had been circling since she'd first walked away from signing the IPO papers months earlier. Did she want to remain at the helm of Pixel Sync, guiding it through public offering and into a new phase of corporate growth? Or did she want to build something new, something more aligned with her evolving sense of purpose? I don't know, she answered honestly. Pixel Sync has been my life for 15 years. The thought of walking away completely. She shook her head. But what we're creating here matters to me. Not just professionally, but personally. Her eyes met his, an unspoken current of understanding passing between them. The personally encompassed more than just the project now, and they both knew it. James moved closer, his practical nature asserting itself. Then you fight for it. Show them what we've accomplished here. Show them how it connects to their world. He gestured toward the window, where the newly installed irrigation system was visible in the western field. Make them see what you see. Alexandra smiled, drawing strength from his straightforward approach. It won't be that simple. They measure success in quarterly returns and market share, not restored soil and sustainable water usage. So translate it, James countered. That's what you do best, bridge worlds that don't naturally connect. Make them understand that food security is the ultimate technology challenge, that sustainable agriculture is the market of the future. He paused, then added quietly, I've seen you convince a stubborn farmer to revolutionize his entire operation. A boardroom full of executives should be easy by comparison. His confidence in her abilities, his understanding of the core issue rather than its surface manifestations, cut through Alexandra's doubts. She hadn't built Pixel Sync by avoiding difficult conversations or shying away from bold visions. She had led through conviction, through the ability to see connections others missed and opportunities others dismissed. You're right, she said, straightening her shoulders. I need to reframe this initiative in terms they can understand and support. She began pacing, her mind already shifting into strategic planning mode. We need data-concrete metrics showing the efficiency gains, water savings, productivity projections, and visuals comparative satellite imagery of the fields before and after implementation, and testimonials not just from agricultural experts, but from technology, integration specialists. James watched with a mixture of admiration and concern as Alexandra transformed before his eyes, the focused, driven tech executive reasserting herself. This was the woman who had built an empire from an idea, who had navigated the cut-through world of venture capital and corporate technology, who had earned the right to be called a visionary in an industry dominated by outsized egos and relentless competition. It was a side of her he had glimpsed occasionally during their partnership, but never seen in full force. The contrast with the more reflective, personally engaged Alexandra he had come to know in recent months was striking, not a contradiction, he realized, but a complementary dimension of a complex woman, navigating multiple worlds. What can I do to help? He asked simply. The question brought her pacing to a halt. She looked at him with surprise and genuine gratitude. You'd help me convince my board that this is worthwhile? Of course, James replied without hesitation. This partnership is important to my farm, to Lily's future, and, he hesitated, then finished honestly, to me, personally. The echo of her own words was not lost on Alexandra. For a moment, they stood in perfect understanding, professional purpose and personal connection harmonizing rather than conflicting. Thank you, she said softly. Then, with renewed determination, let's get to work. We have 2 days to build a case that will secure the future of Harper Farm and agricultural technology at Pixel Sync. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of activity. Alexandra, James, and the core team worked around the clock, compiling data, creating visualizations, developing projections, and crafting a narrative that would resonate with the Pixel Sync board. Lily contributed crucial insights about how to frame the educational and workforce development aspects of the initiative, emphasizing the long-term benefits of investing in the next generation of, quote, agricultural technology specialists. By Wednesday evening, they had assembled a comprehensive presentation that Alexandra would deliver in New York the following morning. The solar team's work had been postponed, with all resources redirected to this critical effort to secure institutional support for the project's continuation. As Alexandra prepared to leave for the airport, a small gathering convened in the farmhouse kitchen. James, Lily, Priya, and the other key team members who had contributed to the presentation. The atmosphere was one of determined optimism mixed with underlying anxiety. So much depended on how the board would receive Alexandra's vision for agricultural technology as a strategic direction for Pixel Sync. "You've got this," Lily assured her, handing over a flash drive containing the final presentation files. "They'd be crazy not to see the potential." "Crazy or not, boards have their own logic," Priya cautioned. "But the case we've built is sound, both technologically and financially." Alexandra nodded, tucking the drive safely into her briefcase. She had changed from her usual farm attire into the corporate armor she hadn't worn in months. A tailored suit, subtle but expensive jewelry, hair styled for the boardroom rather than the field. The transformation was striking, a visual reminder of the different world she would be entering in just a few hours. "Whatever happens," she assured them, "the work we've done here is valuable and will continue. I'm committed to this vision, with or without Pixel Sync's institutional backing." The statement was meant to be reassuring, but it cast a shadow over the gathering. If Alexandra was forced to choose between her company and the Harper Farm Initiative, what would that mean for the partnership they had built? For the personal connections that had formed alongside the professional collaboration? As the others began saying their goodbyes and good lucks, James caught Alexandra's eye and nodded slightly toward the porch. She followed him outside, where the evening air carried the first hint of winter's approach. "I wanted to give you something," he said, reaching into his pocket. "For luck." He held out his hand, revealing a small, smooth stone with unusual striations of color running through its dark surface. "Found this years ago, plowing the North Field. My father said it was a piece of the bedrock that anchors this land, pushed up through the soil over centuries. I've carried it with me through every harvest since he passed." Alexandra accepted the stone, surprised by the weight of it in her palm. "James, I can't take this. It's too personal, too significant." "That's precisely why I want you to carry it tomorrow," he insisted. "To remind you that what we're building here is anchored in something real, something that has endured and will continue long after quarterly reports and stock prices are forgotten." The gesture moved her deeply. In her world of digital innovation and virtual assets, physical tokens of meaning were rare. This simple stone, worn smooth by time and touched by generations of farmers' hands, represented everything that had drawn her to the Harper Project: connection to the land, to history, to things that mattered beyond the abstract measurements of corporate success. "Thank you," she said, closing her fingers around the stone. "I'll keep it with me." They stood in silence for a moment, the unspoken current between them stronger than ever. There was so much that could be said, so many feelings that had developed over the months of working side by side. But with the crucial board meeting looming and the future of their partnership uncertain, neither was ready to put those feelings into words. "Good luck tomorrow," James said finally. "Show them what we see here." Alexandra nodded, slipping the stone into her pocket. "I will." As her car pulled away from the farmhouse, Alexandra glanced in the rearview mirror to see James still standing on the porch, a solitary figure framed by the warm light spilling from within. The image stayed with her as she made the long drive to the airport, a reminder of what she was fighting to preserve: not just a technological initiative or a business opportunity, but a vision of connection and meaning that had transformed both the Harper farm and her own sense of purpose. The Pixel Sync headquarters in downtown Manhattan presented a stark contrast to the rural tranquility of Harper Farm. Glass and steel rose 40 stories into the city skyline, the company logo glowing blue against the morning sun, as Alexandra entered the building she had commissioned just 3 years earlier. Employees stopped to stare as she crossed the lobby, whispers following in her wake. Her partial absence over the past months had spawned countless rumors, and her appearance, new confident, focused, dressed for battle, only fueled the speculation. Michael met her at the executive elevator, relief evident in his expression. "You made it. The board is assembling now." "Of course I made it," Alexandra replied, stepping into the elevator. "I founded this company, Michael. I don't abandon my responsibilities." The implied criticism wasn't lost on him, but he chose not to engage. "The quarterly numbers are strong. That should help set a positive tone." Alexandra nodded absently, her mind already in the boardroom, anticipating questions and preparing responses. As the elevator ascended to the top floor, she reached into her pocket, fingers finding the smooth stone James had given her. Its solid presence grounded her, a tactile reminder of why this presentation mattered beyond corporate strategy and market positioning. The boardroom fell silent as she entered, all eyes turning to the founder and CEO whose recent decisions had puzzled and concerned them. These were smart, successful people whom Alexandra had personally selected for their expertise and vision. They weren't antagonists, they were stewards of the company she had built, acting in what they believed were its best interests. Alexandra, Gordon Chen, no relation, the board chair, greeted her with professional warmth. "It's good to have you back in New York. We've been looking forward to hearing about this agricultural initiative that's captured your attention." The subtle emphasis on captured wasn't lost on Alexandra. It suggested distraction, diversion from more important matters, exactly the perception she needed to change over the next hour. "Thank you, Gordon," she replied, taking her place at the head of the table. "I appreciate the board's patience as we've developed this strategic expansion. Today, I want to share not just what we've accomplished at Harper Farm, but how it connects to Pixel Sync's core mission and future growth." Without further preamble, she launched into the presentation they had prepared so carefully. Beginning with the global challenges of food security, water scarcity, and climate impact on agricultural production, she established the context for technological intervention. She presented data on market size, competitor landscape, and projected growth in agricultural technology over the next decade. Then, she shifted to Harper Farm specifically, showing satellite imagery of the property before their involvement, with clear visual evidence of drought stress and declining productivity. Comparative images from just 3 months into the project demonstrated the initial impact of their interventions: more vibrant vegetation, improved soil moisture patterns, the beginnings of recovery. "What you're seeing," she explained, "is not just the restoration of one farm, but the validation of an integrated technological approach that can be replicated across similar operations nationwide. Each of these innovations, precision irrigation, soil monitoring, energy self-sufficiency, represents a distinct market opportunity for Pixel Sync's core technologies." She proceeded to outline specific applications, how their communication protocols could revolutionize sensor networks across vast agricultural properties, how their data processing algorithms could transform raw environmental inputs into actionable insights for farmers, how their energy management systems could optimize the efficiency of solar-powered agricultural equipment. Throughout, she was careful to connect each innovation directly to existing Pixel Sync products and expertise, drawing clear lines between what might have seemed like a personal side project and the company's strategic interests. The financial projections she presented were conservative but compelling, a steady growth curve leading to significant market share in a sector increasingly critical to global stability. As she concluded, Alexandra pulled up a final in-the-jaw simple photograph of James and Lily Harper standing in their recovering western field, the new irrigation system visible in the background. "This is why it matters," she said, her voice quieter but no less intense. "Not just as a business opportunity, though it certainly is that, but as a chance for Pixel Sync to apply its technological excellence to humanity's most fundamental need: sustainable food production in the face of unprecedented environmental challenges." She looked around the table, meeting each board member's gaze directly. The Harper Farm is not a diversion from our mission. It's an extension of it. A practical, tangible application of our belief that technology should solve real problems and improve real lives. Silence followed her presentation. Gordon was the first to speak. Impressive work, Alexandra. The technological applications are clearer than I anticipated. He glanced at his fellow board members. Questions? For the next 45 minutes, Alexandra fielded inquiries ranging from technical specifications to market timing to competitive analysis. She answered each with the precision and confidence that had earned her reputation as one of the industry's most formidable CEOs, drawing on the exhaustive preparation she and the Harper team had undertaken. Finally, Gordon leaned back in his chair. I think we've gotten a much clearer picture of your vision, Alexandra. The board will need to discuss this privately, of course, but speaking personally, I'm more convinced of the strategic value than I was before your presentation. Several other board members nodded in agreement, though a few maintained skeptical expressions. Alexandra had expected nothing less. Unanimous approval would have been suspicious, suggesting she hadn't pushed hard enough into new territory. Thank you for your consideration, she said, gathering her materials. I'll leave you to your deliberations. Michael has my contact information if you need any clarification. As she exited the boardroom, Alexandra felt the weight of the decision now in others' hands. She had made the strongest case possible for the Agricultural Technology Initiative, framing it as a logical extension of PixelSync's mission rather than a departure from it. Whether the board would accept this narrative remained to be seen. Michael followed her out. That was impressive, he admitted. I didn't see the connections as clearly before. Because you were looking at it as Alexandra's farm project, not as a strategic market expansion, she replied without rancor. It's a natural bias, we all have them. He nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. The board will take a few hours to discuss. Do you want to wait here, or? I'll check into my hotel, Alexandra decided. Call me when they're ready. As she rode the elevator down to the lobby, Alexandra found herself strangely calm. She had done everything possible to secure institutional support for the Harper Initiative. If the board declined to embrace this direction for PixelSync, she would need to make difficult choices about her future with the company she had founded. But even that prospect no longer filled her with the dread it might have just months ago. Her hand found the stone in her pocket, one scowl. More? Its smooth surface, worn by generations of Harper hands. Whatever the board decided, she knew with sudden clarity that her own path forward would include the work she had begun at Harper Farm, the technological challenges that engaged her mind, and the human connections that had begun to heal her spirit. Hours later, as evening descended on Manhattan, Alexandra's phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. They're ready for you, he said simply. Alexandra took a deep breath, steadying herself. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The taxi ride back to PixelSync headquarters gave her time to prepare for either outcome. If the board approved her agricultural technology initiative as a strategic direction, she would need to formalize the expanded scope, establish dedicated teams, and integrate the Harper Farm project into the company's broader portfolio. If they rejected it, she would need to decide whether to continue as CEO while compartmentalizing her personal interest in agricultural innovation, or to make a clean break and pursue this new direction independently. Either way, she realized, her life had fundamentally changed since that summer day when she'd gotten lost on rural backroads and found unexpected purpose in a farmer's shed. The question now was how to honor that transformation while still respecting her responsibilities to the company she had built. The PixelSync building was quieter in the evening hours, the daytime bustle replaced by the subdued presence of employees working late. Alexandra nodded to the security guard as she crossed the lobby, her heels clicking against the polished floor as she made her way to the executive elevator. Michael was waiting when she reached the top floor. They've been in there for hours, he said, walking beside her toward the boardroom. Longest deliberation I've seen in years. That could be good or bad, Alexandra observed calmly. Michael studied her face. You seem remarkably zen about this. A small smile touched her lips. Perspective is a powerful thing. Her hand brushed against the stone in her pocket. Whatever happens in there, I know what matters now. Before Michael could respond to this cryptic statement, they reached the boardroom doors. He gave her shoulder a brief, supportive squeeze, a gesture that would have been unthinkable in their purely professional relationship before her time away, and then stepped back, allowing her to enter alone. The board members looked up as she entered, their expressions professionally neutral. Gordon Chen gestured to the empty chair at the head of the table. "Alexandra, please join us." She took her seat, noting the closed laptops and absence of papers before each member. Decisions had been made, discussions concluded. Now it was time for verdicts. "We've considered your presentation at length," Gordon began, his measured tone giving nothing away. "The agricultural technology initiative you've proposed represents a significant departure from Pixel Sync's established business model and core competencies." Alexandra nodded, accepting this framing without argument. It was factually accurate, if somewhat narrow in perspective. There were legitimate concerns raised about resource allocation, market readiness, and competitive positioning, Gordon continued. Some members expressed reservations about the timeline for meaningful revenue generation from these applications. Each point landed like a weight, building toward what seemed an inevitable rejection. Alexandra steeled herself, already mentally shifting to contingency planning. Gordon's expression softened slightly. "However, the board has also recognized the compelling case you made for agricultural technology as an emerging sector with substantial growth potential and meaningful societal impact. Your presentation demonstrated clear connections between Pixel Sync's existing technological advantages and the needs of this market." End quote. He looked around the table, receiving confirming nods from his colleagues. "Therefore, after extensive deliberation, the board has decided to approve the Agricultural Technology Initiative as a strategic expansion area for Pixel Sync, with appropriate resource allocation and DAO milestone evaluations." The tension Alexandra hadn't realized she was holding released in a measured exhale. "Thank you," she said simply. "I believe this direction will prove valuable both financially and reputationally for the company." "There are conditions," Gordon added, his tone becoming more businesslike. "First, the initiative will be established as a distinct division with dedicated resources to ensure appropriate focus without diverting attention from our core business. Second, we expect quarterly progress reports with clear metrics for technological development, market penetration, and financial performance." Alexandra nodded. These were reasonable governance measures, ones she would have recommended herself. "And finally," Gordon concluded, "the board would like to delay the IPO filing by 6 months to allow for integration of this new division into our overall market positioning. We believe the agricultural technology component could significantly enhance our valuation narrative if properly incorporated." This last condition caught Alexandra by surprise. The IPO delay had been her unspoken hope, but she had expected to fight for it rather than have it offered as part of the board's decision. "I think that's wise," she agreed. "It will give us time to develop more robust case studies and market validation." Gordon smiled slightly. "Good. Then we're aligned." He glanced around the table once more. "Unless there are further questions or concerns, I believe our business is concluded for today." As the meeting adjourned, board members approached Alexandra individually, offering congratulations on her presentation and asking follow-up questions about specific aspects of the agricultural technology initiative. The atmosphere was collegial. Professional these were relationships built over years of shared purpose and mutual respect. When the room had finally cleared except for herself and Michael, Alexandra allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She had successfully bridged her emerging passion for agricultural innovation with her established role at Pixel Sync, creating space for both to coexist and potentially flourish together. "Congratulations," Michael said, leaning against the conference table. "You won them over." "We won them over," Alexandra corrected. "Your skepticism made me build a stronger case. And now we have a board-approved mandate to pursue this direction." Michael nodded, accepting both the credit and the implied responsibility. "So, what happens next with Harbor Farm? Does it become officially part of Pixel Sync now?" The question gave Alexandra pause. The partnership with James and Lily had begun as a personal initiative, shaped by their specific circumstances and developing relationships. Converting it into a corporate case study would change the dynamic in ways she wasn't sure would benefit anyone. Harper Farm remains the primary testing and demonstration site for the Agricultural Technology Division, she said carefully. But its status as a working family farm operated by the Harpers doesn't change. That independence is actually crucial to the credibility of what we're developing there. Michael studied her face. And your personal involvement? Will continue, she confirmed. Alongside my broader responsibilities as CEO, the new division will need dedicated leadership, but I'll remain closely connected to the Harper project specifically. Something in her tone must have revealed more than her words, because Michael's expression shifted to one of surprised understanding. It's not just about the technology for you anymore, is it? It's about the people. Alexandra met his gaze directly. It's about both. The most meaningful innovation happens at the intersection of human needs and technological possibility. Harper Farm represents that intersection perfectly. Michael seemed about to press further, then thought better of it. Well, you've earned the board's support and my respect again. I'll start drafting the organizational structure for the new division tomorrow. Thank you, Michael, Alexandra said sincerely. For your skepticism, your support, and your friendship. All three matter to me. As she left the Pixel Sync building that evening, Alexandra felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with corporate milestones or professional achievements. She had successfully integrated parts of herself that had seemed irreconcilable just months ago: the visionary CEO and the human being seeking deeper connection and purpose. Her first call was to the Harper Farm, where James answered on the second ring. Alexandra? How did it go? The sound of his voice, steady and genuine, brought an involuntary smile to her face as she stood on the busy Manhattan sidewalk. The board approved. Agricultural technology is officially a strategic priority for Pixel Sync. That's fantastic news, James said, relief and pleasure evident in his tone. Lily's here, let me put you on speaker. Alexandra? Lily's excited voice came through. Did they really say yes? They really did, Alexandra confirmed. Which means we can proceed with everything we've planned, and potentially much more. The solar installation gets back on schedule immediately, and we'll have additional resources for the spring planting innovations. This calls for celebration, Lily declared. When are you coming back? The simple question carried more weight than its surface meaning, Alexandra realized. Not if she was coming back, but when. They had assumed her return, her continued presence in their lives, regardless of the board's decision. My flight's tomorrow afternoon, she told them. I have some organizational details to handle here in the morning, setting up the new division. New division? James asked. Pixel Sync Agricultural Technology, Alexandra explained. The Harper Farm initiative is being formalized as part of a broader strategic expansion. But don't worry, the terms of our partnership remain exactly as we agreed. This just means more institutional support and resources. Well, we'll have dinner waiting when you get back tomorrow, James said. Nothing fancy, but we've got plenty to celebrate. The simple offer a meal shared at the end of a significant day touched Alexandra deeply. In the world she'd inhabited for so long, successes were marked with expensive restaurants and rare wines, achievements measured in stock options and market position. The prospect of celebrating in a farmhouse kitchen table with people who had come to matter to her personally felt infinitely more appealing. I'd like that, she said softly. I'll text when I'm on the way from the airport. As she ended the call, Alexandra's hand found the stone in her pocket, once more the piece of Harper bedrock that had accompanied her through this pivotal day. Tomorrow she would return it to James, but not as a gesture of completion or closure. Rather as a recognition that something had fundamentally shifted between them, a foundation established for whatever might come next. The flight back to rural America the following afternoon gave Alexandra time to reflect on the path that had led her to this unexpected juncture in her life. 6 months ago, she had been solely focused on Pixel Sync's growth and market position, measuring success in user metrics and quarterly returns. The idea of investing significant time and resources in agricultural technology would have seemed tangential at best, a distraction from her core mission. And yet, that wrong turn on a summer day had led to the most right decision she'd made in years, not just professionally, but personally. The Harper Farm Initiative had reconnected her with her grandfather's legacy, with her original passion for solving tangible problems, with a sense of purpose beyond corporate achievement. More than that, it had brought James and Lily Harper into her life, two people who had challenged her assumptions, expanded her understanding of value and success, and gradually become important to her in ways she had not experienced in her driven, isolated existence as a tech CEO. As the plane began its descent, Alexandra gazed out the window at the patchwork of fields below the agricultural landscape she had once viewed merely as flyover territory between important destinations. Now she saw it differently, as a complex, vital system sustaining human life, as a frontier for technological innovation, as home. The thought gave her pause. Home had been a fluid concept in her adult life first, a series of apartments in tech hubs, then the luxury penthouse in Manhattan she had barely had time to enjoy. The idea that she might find home in this rural landscape, among people whose lives had been so different from her own, was both surprising and strangely fitting. James was waiting at the small regional airport when she emerged from the terminal, leaning against his truck with the casual patience of someone accustomed to working with nature's timeline rather than digital urgency. He straightened as he spotted her, a smile warming his weather-lined face. "Welcome back," he said simply, taking her bag. "How was the flight?" "Uneventful," Alexandra replied, suddenly aware of how easily they had fallen into the rhythms of regular connection, of anticipated returns. "How's the farm?" "Solar team's back at work," James reported as they walked to his truck. "They started setting up the mounting framework this morning, and Lily's got news, but she made me promise not to steal her thunder." The drive back to the farm felt different from their usual professional commute, more personal, more laden with unspoken possibilities. They talked about the board meeting, about Michael's visit, about the weather forecast for the coming week, but beneath these practical topics ran a current of awareness, of things not yet acknowledged directly. As they turned onto the long drive leading to the farmhouse, Alexandra saw Lily standing on the porch, waving enthusiastically. The young woman bounded down the steps as they parked, practically vibrating with excitement. "You're back. Perfect timing," she called. "I just got the email an hour ago." "What email?" Alexandra asked, smiling at her enthusiasm. Lily thrust her phone forward, displaying an official-looking message. "I got accepted to State University's agricultural engineering program. Early decision, with a full scholarship." "Lily, that's wonderful," Alexandra exclaimed, genuinely delighted. "I knew you'd get in, but early decision, that's exceptional." "The admissions officer specifically mentioned my hands-on experience with innovative agricultural technology implementation," Lily said, grinning. "Apparently, that made me an especially attractive candidate." James watched his daughter with undisguised pride. "She's going to revolutionize farming before she's 30, he predicted. First Harper to go to college. The three made their way into the farmhouse, where the promised celebration dinner was in various stages of preparation. Lily immediately drew Alexandra into a detailed recounting of the application process and her plans for university, while James finished cooking. The domestic scene struck Alexandra with its simple warmth, so different from the sleek, impersonal luxury that had characterized her life before Harper Farm. As they sat down to eat, Alexandra reached into her pocket and withdrew the stone James had given her. "I brought this back," she said, placing it on the table between them. "It worked. Your piece of bedrock got me through." James looked at the stone, then back to her face. "It belongs here," he agreed. "But not back in my pocket. It should be part of whatever we're building." The statement held weight beyond its literal meaning, an acknowledgement of something taking shape between them, something as solid and enduring as the stone itself. Lily glanced between them, a knowing smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I think I'm going to check on the irrigation monitors after dinner," she announced casually. "They probably need a good hour or so of my undivided attention." James shot his daughter a look that was half embarrassment, half gratitude. Subtle, Lil. Just creating space for important conversations, she replied innocently. You know, about agricultural technology and strategic partnerships and stuff. The dinner continued with comfortable conversation about the university, the farm, the newly approved Pixel Sync division. But undercurrents of anticipation ran beneath these practical topics, the sense that, after the meal concluded, after Lily made her convenient exit, words would finally be given to the feelings that had been developing between James and Alexandra for months. When they eventually found themselves alone on the porch, watching the sunset paint the western fields in gold and crimson, the moment felt both inevitable and fraught with possibility. They stood side by side at the railing, shoulders nearly touching, the stone resting between them like a bridge connecting their worlds. So, James said finally, his voice quiet in the evening stillness. Pixel Sync agricultural technology. Yes, Alexandra confirmed. A new division, with dedicated resources and institutional support. And where does that leave you? Still CEO of the whole enterprise? She nodded. For now. The IPO has been delayed 6 months while we integrate the new division into the company narrative. After that, she hesitated. After that, I have decisions to make about my long-term role. James turned slightly to face her. And where does that leave this? He gestured vaguely between them. Whatever has been happening between us. The directness was so characteristic of him. No corporate hedging, no strategic ambiguity, just honest questions about real feelings. It was one of the qualities Alexandra had come to value most in their evolving relationship. I don't know, she admitted. I've never been good at separating my personal and professional lives, mostly because I haven't had much of a personal life to separate. She met his gaze directly. But I know that what's happening between us matters to me. More than I expected. More than I was looking for when I accidentally napped in your shed. A smile touched James's lips at the memory. Not exactly how I plan to meet someone either. Is that what we've done? Alexandra asked softly. Met someone? In the sense that matters? James was quiet for a moment, considering her question with the thoughtfulness she had come to expect from him. I think so, he said finally. I haven't felt this way about anyone since Marie died. Didn't think I would again, to be honest. The admission hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. Alexandra reached for the stone, running her fingers over its smooth surface. When I left Pixel Sync's headquarters yesterday, after the board approved the agricultural division, my first thought wasn't about the company or the technology. It was about getting back here, to this farm, to you and Car. Lily. She looked up to find James watching her, his expression a mixture of hope and caution. That means something, she continued. Something I'm still figuring out, but something I don't want to ignore or postpone any longer. James reached across the railing, his hand covering hers where it rested on the stone. I'm not a complicated man, Alexandra. I don't have your education or your corporate experience. What I know is farming, family, and building things that last. His fingers tightened slightly around hers. And I know that when you're here, things make sense in a way they haven't for a long time. The simple honesty of his words moved her deeply. In her world of strategic positioning and market advantage, such straightforward expression of feeling was rare and precious. I think, she said carefully, turning her hand to intertwine her fingers with his, that we could build something meaningful together. Not just the agricultural technology initiative, though that matters enormously, but something personal, something just for us. James smiled, the final traces of hesitation leaving his expression. I'd like that. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility. Then, with the natural confidence that characterized his movements in the fields, James closed the distance between them, his free hand gently cupping her face as he kissed her. It was a simple gesture, tender rather than passionate, exploratory rather than demanding. And yet, in that moment of connection, Alexandra Shentek visionary, reluctant billionaire, seeker of purpose felt something settle within her soul. A recognition of having found, quite by accident, exactly where she was meant to be. When they eventually separated, Both a little breathless, a little stunned by the step they had taken, James kept her hand in his. "So what happens now?" he asked. "With you splitting time between here and New York, with Lily going to college, with all the changes coming?" Alexandra looked out over the farmette, the western fields beginning to recover thanks to the water from the hidden aquifer, at the solar array taking shape near the barn, at the farmhouse that had begun to feel more like home than her luxury penthouse ever had. "We figure it out," she said simply. "Day by day, season by season, together." James nodded, accepting this approach. "Like farming, you plan as best you can, then adapt to whatever comes." "Exactly like farming," Alexandra agreed, smiling. "Though, with hopefully fewer equipment breakdowns and pest infestations." James laughed, the sound warm in the gathering twilight. "No promises there. Life has a way of throwing challenges at you regardless of how well you plan." As if to punctuate his point, Lily's voice called from inside the house. "Dad? Alexandra? You might want to see this." They exchanged glances, both reluctant to end this moment, but recognizing the practical demands of their partnership, both professional and now personal. "Coming!" James called back, giving Alexandra's hand a final squeeze before releasing it. Inside, they found Lily staring at her laptop screen, excitement evident in her expression. "The soil sensors in the western field are showing significant improvement in nutrient retention since the last irrigation cycle," she reported. "The amendments are working even better than projected." Alexandra moved to look over her shoulder, professional interest immediately engaged. "That's remarkable. At this rate, the soil could be ready for full planting by spring, not just the test plots we had planned." James joined them, studying the data with a farmer's practiced eye and newly acquired technical knowledge. "If these readings hold, we could be looking at the best yield from that section in a decade." The three of them bent over the laptop, discussing implications and adjustments to their implementation plan. To an outside observer, it might have appeared an ordinary scene of colleagues collaborating on a project. But there was something more present in that farmhouse kitchen, a nascent family forming around shared purpose and growing affection, a future taking root as surely as the recovering soil in the western fields. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, and James had walked Alexandra to her car for the drive back to her rented cottage in town, they lingered in the farmyard, reluctant to part. "Stay," James said simply. "Not necessarily tonight, but eventually. There's room here. It's closer to the project, makes more sense than driving back and forth." The invitation held more significance than its practical phrasing suggested. It was an offering of place, of belonging, of integration into the rhythm of farm life, rather than hovering at its edges. Alexandra touched his face gently. "Eventually," she agreed. "When we're ready. When Lily's comfortable with the shift. When we've figured out the balance between Pixel Sync and Harper Farm in my professional life." James nodded, accepting this measured approach. "Just know the invitation stands. This place has always had room for one more person who cares about its future." As Alexandra drove away, headlights illuminating the familiar route back to town, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been on the verge of taking Pixel Sync public, securing her place in tech industry history, but feeling increasingly empty despite her professional success. Now, she was building something entirely different, a technology initiative with genuine purpose, a personal connection with depth and promise, a future that integrated professional achievement with human meaning in ways, quote, she had never thought possible. All because a wrong turn had led her to the right place, a struggling farmer's shed where, for the first time in years, she had allowed herself to truly rest. And in that rest, she had found not retirement, but renewal. Not escape, but engagement with what mattered most. In the coming months, the Harper Farm Initiative would continue to evolve, soil recovering, technology integrating, crops growing where drought had recently prevailed. Lily would depart for university, returning with new knowledge and perspectives to contribute to the family legacy. Pixel Sync's agricultural technology division would establish itself as a leader in the emerging field, demonstrating how innovation could serve fundamental human needs. And Alexandra Chen, who had once measured success in markets conquered and competitors outmaneuvered, would find herself increasingly drawn to a different metric: the health of specific fields, the well-being of specific people, the building of something that would outlast quarterly reports and stock valuations. She would not abandon Pixel Sync. The company she had founded would remain an important part of her legacy. But increasingly, her heart would be anchored in the rural landscape where an accidental nap had led to an intentional life, in the shed where a tired traveler had found rest, in the farmhouse where a tech CEO had found purpose, in the fields where a struggling farmer and an accomplished executive had found, in each other, something worth building together. As winter gave way to spring, as dormant soil awakened to new possibility, as seeds planted with care unfolded toward the light, Alexandra and James would continue writing their unexpected story. Not a tale of retirement or escape, but of renewal and engagement. Not an ending, but a beginning as rich with promise as the western fields after the first nourishing rain. And it had all started with a simple act of kindness: a farmer offering his shed for a nap, unaware that the guest was a tech CEO looking for something she had not known she needed. Unaware that in that quiet moment of unexpected hospitality, both their lives would change forever. Unaware that sometimes the most valuable things grow from the most barren soil, and the most meaningful connections form when we least expect them, in the shade of an old shed, over a jug of cool water, between two souls ready for a new season of growth.